You are now entering Maximum Driftcast, the only drifting podcast hosted by a Spanish soccer mom, a 30-year-old silver-haired fox going on 60, and finally, a 200-pound bowl of spaghetti with chimichanga arms.
The champions, we are the champions.
And welcome once again to Maximum Driftcast, the only drifting podcast hosted by Corey Hosford. Corey.
Wow,
Corey.
Paco, that was one of the best intros I've ever heard you do.
That was really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The thing is, right before the show started, Paco goes in this radio jock DJ voice. He's like, all right.
Radio jock?
You guys ready?
Like as in a jock strap?
No, like
Disco jockey.
Oh,
Disco,
jockey.
come on,
I got
Paco.
it.
All right, we're
Dan.
going live. All right,
Dan.
cue audio, and we're live.
We're gonna cut out all the BS today. We're going straight into some very unique guests. We have both mom and dad here back together for one more show. We've never had both mom and dad in the same room before, so I'm pretty excited. So big questions: which one's mom? Which one's dad?
I knew you were going to ask that.
Okay. Yeah.
Why isn't it dad and dad? I keep
It
asking.
can't be dad and dad. It's a new millennium. I guess you guys can both be dads. What do you think?
Right.
We're open-minded.
Dad and dad it is.
There you go.
Dad and
there you
dad
go.
it is. All right, two dads. So we've got the dad of drifting,
The
Jim
dads.
Law, and the other dad of Formula Drift, Ryan Sage, here with us. Very unique episode. We haven't had both of you on before, and we like to do kind of these biannual now State of the Drift Union shows, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to get all of the questions in and out and get all of our points wrong so we can make a bunch of internet kids very upset with our statements.
Okay.
Deal?
Deal. Shake on it.
But any other preliminaries from you guys, Paco and Corey, or you just want to get right into it?
I just want to get right into it. I mean, just missed to say that it's also hosted by Sam Nalvin. Sam Nalvin's Velvet Voice, and your server. No, how do you say that?
At your service.
Yeah, yours
Your
only,
server.
Paco. Brian, Big Balls Brian in the controls, and
Yep.
let's just go to the questions. Ryan.
Ryan and Jim, 2017 Formula Drift. How'd you do?
Oh,
Okay.
you go first, Jim.
All right, 2018. What do you think?
Next question.
We'll do okay.
All right, 2017. So we had the storm that is Jimmy D, the human hot dog, James Dean, coming in here and rocking our bodies. Let's start there. What did you guys know? Did you guys expect that this Irish sensation was going to come in and rip it up like he did?
No, I mean, I think we knew that James had been competing all across Europe, and he's been dominating European drifting, ever since kind of his temporary, run here in FD. And we knew he had learned a lot and, put together a pretty solid program. He came multiple times and did the research that I think any international team should have done or should do as they come into the series. And he did his homework, and he came and, watched what was going on and prepared to compete. But, I don't think anybody expected that type of dominant campaign. But, we love it. Like we love things that get mixed up. We love the podium getting mixed up. We love new faces and new champions. And, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I think if you go back to 2012, with Daigo, we had kind of a Daigo effect that radically changed the way that the sport operated and competitively was put together, programs, a way that even driving adjusted and changed. And I think that happened this year as well with James, and it certainly is going to probably reflect in one of the most dramatic off-season adjustments that teams that are usually fighting for the championship and those that are trying to break into the top 10, top 16 will make those adjustments. And for me, I think it just makes the series more exciting every time you bring in this kind of like exogenous shock into the system that mixes things up and makes people be more creative, and creativity is a big part of what we do.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was thinking about that too, like how this is kind of a wild adjustment that these drivers might have to make. But I'm not sure how they're going to be able to adjust as much. Not that the adjustment that was made post Daigo was exactly effective when everyone just immediately threw 600 horsepower at their cars, because then we just saw tons of reliability issues and tons of crashes. But this time it feels less like just a massive horsepower gain and more of an overall refinement. And I guess the other similarity to the Daigo thing is that both of them, their driving styles have kind of thrown a new spin on the sport and kind of shocked other drivers. And so back to the cars though. I mean, there's just kind of an overall refinement, and there's something crazy about his car that I can't pin down because I'm not an engineer, but the way it moves, the way it rotates. I think the only other car that kind of looks similar was Osmo's grocery getter. But yeah, I'm not sure what drivers are going to have to do to step it up. Do you guys have any ideas what the big other drivers need to do to step it up? I think Osmo's there, but what does everyone else have to do to get on Dean's level?
Well, I from my side of things, just having had conversations with a lot of drivers and spending a lot of time in Japan, everybody knows that the S chassis and the S15 in particular is one of the most world-renowned chassis that there is. And when you have that as a fundamental starting point, and you can build off of all the years of data that people have in order to make that car perform the way that you want it to at the level that we have in Formula D, it does give you some kind of advantage where you're not necessarily locked into a chassis, which a lot of the guys are. And what we're trying to do is have it so that you can have this wide variety of different chassis. So somebody can go out and do a deal with Mazda or Ford or Toyota and bring cars to the series and have them be on a general equal playing field. Now, the challenge will be for the guys that are locked into these chassis is to figure out what they need to do to those chassis in terms of modification in order to get them on that level where they can compete with a guy that can basically invest everything into a chassis that's already proven and get up to that level. And so that'll be the big question in the offseason. I know fabricators that love that to have that as a challenge. You look at Steph, for example, pretty much has done the impossible with many different chassis. So it'll be great to see how these guys adjust.
Right. Corey Paco.
I looking at James Dean and Peter's program, especially linking up with Bridges Racing, obviously they had a lot of experience with the 2JZ sets up prior to Daigo and Robbie being there, and I think this was one of the first years where they didn't really have a engine failure or any catastrophic engine malfunctions. I think it was just a big thing of reliability. We talk about horsepower being a big factor, and we talked about that Daigo effect when Daigo used to come in and make 1,200 horsepower, and everybody figured they'd have to crank it up. But when I talked to Bridges, they said Dean was making about 890 horsepower to the wheels, which in consideration, if you look back to when Daigo was making 1,200, it's like, man, 890, that's not going to cut it. But realistically, it's just how well can you make that 890 perform and how long can you make it last and make it reliable. And like I said, one of the coolest things about talking to those guys is just their attitude and how they operate. Because when I went to the pits at Irwindale and I was talking to Brian and Dean, I saw that they had their spare engine out in their pits. And I'm like, dude, why do you guys have that engine? All you have to do is really qualify and roll off the line in top 32. I'm like, why are you doing all these practice laps? And they're like, literally, for verbatim, their word was, because we're not bitches. We're going to run. So literally, they ran practice, every single lap in practice. They drove hard. And, that's the thing is they had a great team that just like, no, we're just going to do everything we can and drive. We're ready for whatever comes thrown at us. And they have a very simple platform, as kind of Ryan was mentioning earlier. It's not how powerful it is, but just how reliable. And they seem to have it figured out.
Before you get away from it real quick, that surprised me that they ran. I even asked James about that. I was like, dude, you're running a full practice? Like, just chill out. You've already got the track dialed. All you have to do is show up to the line and you're going to make it. And we've seen people screw up big doing that before by crashing in practice and not making it to the line. So, but he did say just the same thing to me. Is like, hey, I'm going to run the whole thing. I'm not just going to stop because I've got to just show up.
Which, in perspective, he probably would have been able to battle Peter, because his engine would have had a lot less hours, a lot less use, and it probably wouldn't have break before battling Peter, right?
No, what happened is Odie crashed into him.
That's right.
His day.
Okay, my bad then. I just for some reason I thought his engine was blow up, but I really wonder what's like if the chassis itself actually brings some kind of advantage in order to make his style so fluid and clean. Because like the other only car that I can think of that it behaves similar to that, it would be Forrest Wangs, which obviously we didn't see him run this season. Because like the other only cars that were like as I would say as fast and like grippy, like that look at the same level would be, in my opinion, would be Vaughn. But Vaughn didn't seem fluid or smooth. It was just more like
the
rough.
S15s do though.
Well, the
Like
other
the S15s, like in theirs specifically, just like watch them in the burnout boxes, they turn differently. Like they rotate on a top, almost like an all-wheel drive car doing just like donuts in a parking lot without moving.
You think they
it's
have a
just like
better distribution?
yeah, they just rotate so well and so quickly, and it just allows those guys to drive with that snappy style.
Last point that I want to add on to that is he's been driving S chassis for I don't know how long. Didn't he run an S chassis his first year with you guys, Jim and Ryan?
I think it was one of the Falcon cars, and yeah, I think it was an S chassis.
And that was what, 2010?
Yeah, 2000. Yep.
So you have this dude who's been driving S chassis from, he hasn't really.
Well, he
turned
drives an RX-7 as well.
as a spare in one of his series. But I'm just saying, this is a dude.
But he was
who's been-
born in an S chassis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once again, he's not leaving a platform that he's comfortable with, and all these guys are changing engine packages and vehicle packages. Like Forsberg, when he went to the twin turbo setup this year, he ran the VK half the season because it wasn't dialed in. It's like I think those dudes are not going that route to make a big change because they know what works for them and how they have it dialed in. But yeah.
So I think that we can kind of coin this as the it's not even the Daigo horsepower battle anymore. It's the reliability battle, and the reliability battle has been going on for a while, but it looks like it's kind of come to a head now, and we saw this team that showed up with a tried and true 2JZ S chassis and dominate. But let's move away from Dean. And what was the biggest success of the 2017 season? And then what is the biggest, I don't want to say letdown, but what was the most complicated part of the 2017 season?
Oh, wow. That's a big question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go, Jim, and then I'll give mine if it's different.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest success. I mean, it's not life changing. I mean, we've been doing this for 14 years, so we can't shift the drifting world upside down every season. But I think the success always comes that we've had stable growth, that fan base has grown, both online, offline. The live event attendance, the live stream, the content views, the social media, ingestion of content. I think we've grown. I think the brand has continued to grow, not only here in America, but globally. I think we're, the focal point of the drifting world. I think that's an ever, kind of manifestation of what we're doing, and it's successful as it keeps growing. And we've added new sponsors and new brands coming on board, and we're talking to more for next season. I would say the disappointing part is obviously what has been chronicled widely this season is the lack of a full 32 car field. We can't hide from that. I think that's very apparent. So we have to address that, but a lot of it has to come to a fine balance between what we can address as a series and what a team can do on their own. So it's a balance of the team equipping themselves and promoting themselves and preparing a campaign for the upcoming season, and really working with us and taking advantage of the things that we bring to the table. We can bring a sold out audience to the table, but if you're not communicating that to your sponsors or taking advantage of that opportunity and bringing new partners on board, then there's only so much we can do. But it's still a two-way street where we need to work together to ensure that a fuller field competes in the series.
Yeah, for me, it's similar, but a little bit more specific to kind of my day-to-day is the kind of the influx of the growth of drifting and the internet has kind of gone up in tandem. We were kind of born into this space. And this year in particular, we saw and we changed some of our distribution strategy, and we saw the biggest year-over-year jump that we've seen in live stream viewership and content views than we have in any other year, or something like 600% jump in viewership. Wow. And a lot of that is coming globally, and so that's a really positive statistic for us to put out there. And I think that it helps refine our discussions about ways that we can help teams and drivers monetize their programs better and help people better educate themselves about what this sport is really all about and what it means to tap into our audience. The downside for me this year, probably the biggest frustration, has really been dealing with all the distractions that are out there in terms of what is going on within the global drifting community. And you guys have already done plenty of shows on the FIA thing, so I don't want to rehash that. But for me, when I look at the final event of Irwindale or Long Beach or any one of our events, and I see the level of not only competition, but the style of event that it is. And this is not to toot our horn, but just to say what the community here in the States has done on the professional level. And then you see what we're going up against. And some people have maybe a discombobulated understanding of what drifting is really all about and what it is that we're trying to do. And there's a lot of confusion and a lot of confusion in messaging out there. And what we're trying to do is hopefully show people what we think at the least a professional level, what the sport is really all about. So having to deal with those distractions is really hard because it takes us away from our messaging.
Cool. So my counter questions to these kind of go into the next bigger topic of what we're doing in 2018. Do you guys have any, Corey, Paco, do you have any comments on 2017 season still we want to get to before we roll into the future?
No, just overall, compared to previous seasons, how did you guys feel this performance-wise compared, and who was some standouts that really you guys are looking forward to see roll into 2018?
You mean in terms of drivers and teams?
Yeah.
I mean, Jim made a comment in a video very early on in the season that really resonated with me, is that at the beginning of the season, we started to see teams really kind of understand the idea of building out a program. In particular, we saw the combination of Forsberg Turk, we saw Gittin and Denofa, and there's many others, Steph's side of things, the Worthhouse guys. I think that is a really interesting area to explore because it really helps people understand maybe the direction that things could potentially go, helping build your program out bigger, better deliverables, what they should be doing in order to build their business model out. And so for me, that was really exciting because we're starting to see at a higher level, some of these guys put together programs that are really, really attractive to sponsors and brands. And ultimately, at the end of the day, for those guys, they need that in order to survive. And then the more they understand how to do that and they're able to leverage their program, the better and more healthy that they're going to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, 2017 was definitely the year of the teams and the pooling of resources in the terms of like the smallish two-man organizations that were pretty successful, either on the track or media-wise.
Well, yeah, point out some people that stood out in my eyes. You look at Castro, and I think he won an award at the banquet, right, as the most improved driver. But Castro had a phenomenal season. He definitely. It was a dude that came out of the woodwork and was like, holy cow, this dude just took James Dean out, ran a strong run against Forsberg. Another driver that really stood out, I didn't expect, obviously, Osbo to do as well as he did in a new chassis with Papadakis.
Yeah, that was actually
That was pretty incredible. And now, having a season underneath the belt, what do they do next year? But there was so much that happened over this 2017 season that's like, man, there's so much more to look forward to going into 18.
Like almost every driver had a highlight this season. Jeff Jones. I mean,
I was gonna say we go all the way to the and I don't mean this in a mean way at all. But we go to like the back of the bracket, and Jeff Jones he put down some amazing runs, and I mean everyone seemed to have their moment in the sun. It looked like.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the results from having a smaller bracket of drivers. Even though trying to look for a positive side on not having that many drivers, at least there's more chances for them to shine, but at the same time, I think like obviously that's in my opinion that was the worst part of this season, the incomplete brackets, less than 32 drivers at least.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into that then. I think that was one of the things that you'd mentioned, Jim, is that was a very vocal issue for fans is having Byron be so prominent in there. And what is the plan to remedy this? Or do we roll with it, or what do we do in 2018?
Yeah, one of the things that we first started is we realized, too, that a lot of the information that we have, it's twofold, right? One, it's teams and sometimes sponsors are not aware of the information that has been made available to them. We make a post-event report after every event, and that's distributed to all the teams. Now, how many teams have actually opened that up, read it, used it, and redistributed it to their sponsors? There is a good amount that hasn't. that I think was kind of but we also realized that we need to do a better job to remind that, look, we are we're a resource to you, the team, that how can we help you in enhancing your program? How can we help you in supporting you with information and analytics and data, et cetera, for you to report back to your sponsors? But at the end of the day, we can't sell the sponsorship for you per se. We can't budget your team. We can't hire your crew. That is still in your hands, but we are a useful tool that you need to pick up the phone or drop an email to us and feel free to ask for the support, the information that you need, and we'll do our best to support you in that way.
So I know it's still early and there might be some late additions, but I'm sure you guys already have a kind of vague idea of how many drivers are going to be in Pro 1 next year. How are we looking in that regard, and do we need to change the bracket size? Not that we can.
I don't think we need to change the bracket size. I think if there's continued years where you have stuff like this, I think we could look at an alternative option. But I think mostly what we see internally is that, what Jim spoke to is a very important aspect of helping people monetize their programs better. The other thing that we found is that when we started going through the petition process last year, we gave something like the equivalent of 42 licenses out, something like that, at the end of 2016, which meant there could have been 42 drivers in the series.
Right.
And what we noticed is that some of those people that were getting those petitions were not really, or getting those license after their petition was granted, weren't really doing anything with it. They were taking it and then go and try to sell a program. And there was other people that didn't get a petition request submitted to us that was approved, that might have very well come in because they had the funding or they had the know-how to do that. And so now we're realizing that we kind of have to go through a little bit of a process with some of these petition holders to make sure that they have skin in the game, because there's certain people that actually would come into the series if they had the opportunity, whereas some people were just using the petition as a way to go and try to find their way into the series. Right. That's more or less, I think, probably not the way to do it.
So what are you expecting for 2018 at this point? I know it's still early, of course, but do you see more cars in the top 32 field?
It seems probable that we're going to be above 32. It's hard to say exactly. I mean, we were talking about that this morning, Jim. I don't know what number we think we could commit to, but it seems like we're going to be above 32.
Cool.
Yeah, we're actually looking. Yeah, I mean, if all the interested parties, and like Ryan said, last year we gave out a good amount of petitions, and those programs fell apart. And on top of the drivers that dropped out of the series, Tyler McCory, Pat Mordaunt, it was a double negative. You had petition holders that didn't come through, and then you had current drivers that were licensed because of the results from previous years that didn't compete. So this year, I think we're looking much better, and the inquiries are a lot more serious. So hopefully everybody comes through and we have a full field.
And only because we've sorry. Oh,
I was going to say, yeah, just in real quick, and those 42 petitions, or those 42 that field of 42, those petitions were for Pro 1, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, the vetting process to go through Pro 2 to get Pro 1, or you can petition to get that Pro 1 license. And you guys did a pretty cool deal for the Pro 2 guys, or the top, four finishers in Pro 2, to make an incentive to, hey, do you know what? If you guys want to make a jump, we're here to help. Can you guys elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so towards the end of the second half of this year, we realized that we need to assist in that, bridging that gap. And so we played a part in assisting that. And instead of offering kind of pure cash and, who knows what teams or drivers, would do with it, we offer the top three finishers essentially a credit to run in the Pro Championship the following year. So the top three finishers from this year, from top down, had something like, like Kevin Lawrence, the champion, had 7,000 in credit that goes towards the 2018 season, and then it was 3,500, and then it was like 2,000 or 1,500 thereafter. So that could go towards your registration, that can go towards your hard cars, that could go towards tickets for sponsors, that can be applied for the following season.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool,
Yeah.
actually, because
Yeah.
I think that seems to be that was the issue from some people moving on from Pro 2, that they just did Pro 2 again, even though they seemed like they were possibly ready, but like maybe they're thinking like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to afford it. But is this help, financial help, or how do you say that, aid?
Yeah, it's just it's a credit that they can spend with the
Yeah,
series.
is that credit good for, like, let's say, even if you don't move on that year, or only applies if you move on to pro that next year?
It only applies to move on to pro.
But that's like, if you can't wait like for next year, let's say I'm gonna take a year off and use that credit for the next year.
No.
No, you
I
can't.
don't even know if we've talked about that.
Yeah, I feel like
that's
that'd be
interesting.
stacking too much money.
Yeah. It's a rollover. You just keep rolling
Yeah.
over. Is that
It's like minutes.
They just win Pro 2 twice, and then they get double the credit.
Yep, 2 free years
like,
of Pro
yeah,
1.
Yeah, getting your mileage on your credit card, like.
And I want to talk all about Pro 2 specifically when we talk about the future of the sport in a little bit. But right now, I think I just want to focus on the Pro 1 competition for 2018. But before we move topics again, so have you ever? We only talked about it on the show a couple times because we saw a couple events with mid 20s or low 20s drivers. Have you considered what it would be like just to run a top 32, or excuse me, just to run a top 16 and eliminating top 32?
Yeah, you're talking about in pro, right?
Yeah, Pro 1. Yeah, we'll talk about Pro 2 a little bit later. But yeah, it's Pro 1 right now. What happens if you do that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting topic. I was actually having this conversation today, and Jim can get into some of the nuances of it. But when we originally started the series, it was a top 16 series. It had always been that way. It's always been the kind of the foundation of where the sport has started, at least for us and on the Japanese side. And we only moved to top 32 after we did the World Championship in 2008. Because there was such a huge influx of drivers, and at this time we didn't really have like the Pro 2 ladder at that point, so there was a lot of drivers coming into pro, and to be able to field them, and also because we thought the level was at least getting there somewhat, that we could afford to do that. And once we did that, we committed ourselves to it, to do that over the years, and we've carried on that way since 2008, and it's been pretty successful. But there is, I think, at least a reasonable discussion to be had to say what would happen when the Pro 2 series grows and strengthens to a certain point, and we put some more investment in there into the content distribution side of things, maybe so the TV side of things, where it becomes kind of like a nationwide type deal. Does it make more sense to concentrate the dollars into a tighter funnel and into the Pro series? And the answer to that might be yes, but it would definitely take a lot of support from the industry and from teams and from sponsors to get on board with that. I think if we just have this one dip year where we have these guys, where we go down to 28, where we lost Daigo's program and we lost Tyler McCory's program and a couple other guys that would have had us above 32, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Right. So I think if it continues in this way, then I think it's a worthy discussion to have. There's also a bigger discussion, which is probably not worth getting into this conversation, but would be a podcast within itself, is talking about if we shifted the business model entirely to a franchise-based model, which takes a lot of nuance to get into and how that exactly works and whether or not it's even relevant to us. But it certainly, I think, is a cool discussion to have, and it could be something for the future.
And just at least so I even know what it is. What is a franchise-based model? What's an example of that?
So, I mean, if you look at like the NFL, Formula One, any of these kind of stick and ball sports basically operate under some kind of a franchise model. And there's always something tied to it in terms of television rights and money filtration down to teams and things like that. And so that kind of has to be a big part of the equation. And we've talked about this probably, I don't know how long we talked about this, probably for 5 years, about how it would possibly work. And it's really complicated, but it's interesting.
I mean, yeah, even more so because the formerly I guess the original Drift Australia series were the first to institute that, and that was, I think they were ahead of their time. But there is something to be said, because there's things like equity and profit sharing and all that. But at the same time, how do you balance that out? If we're limiting to 16 drivers at any given time in the pro level, how do we cycle in fresh talent? How do we cycle in just fresh faces and fresh drivers? And as we've seen, there's tons of potential out there in the quality of drivers. It's really how to support them and and them helping themselves, put together a proper campaign.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we can definitely get into an entire show about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about driver development and the bigger picture stuff at the end of the show. But Jim, you mentioned, or not Jim, Ryan, you mentioned stick and ball sports. Corey, you're a fan of stick and ball sports, right?
Yeah, for sure. And playing flag football and two-hand touch.
Yeah. Okay. So
Actually,
on the topic. Yeah, go ahead.
You have a
I was just gonna move more into 2018, what we're seeing for the season. But you have something on this, Paco?
Yeah, well, actually, moving on to 2018, I see people in the comments talking about the track layouts that would favor more of a closer tandem rather than the driver who's got more horsepower. Is that something like we see, for example, like in Irwindale, like every year is a different layout. Texas already has like 2 different layouts or 3, I think. So, are you guys considering big changes about layouts for next year?
I would say that generally speaking, we would need to be shown that there are layouts that are going to be more conducive to tighter drifting. If that could be shown, then that should definitely be on the table. I mean, the way that we go about initiating track layouts is between Kevin, who runs all of our competition, and the 3 judges. And between those 4 gentlemen, they basically are the ones that are more or less in charge of the track layout. Now, some of that is constrained by what we need to do in terms of operations, but they're always looking for ways to try to make that tighter. And those 4 people are basically a filter from the drivers. So drivers obviously have input in how they think that a track might be managed better for competition. But certainly, drivers are a lot of times thinking about what's going to be best for them, and that's totally fine. What we're trying to think about is what is going to be the best form of entertainment. If we can be shown that there's another way to lay out a track that would make it more entertaining because the tandem is tighter or whatever, then we would be open to that.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of one of those common repeated internet questions that I think is kind of bullshit because we saw a shit ton of tight tandem this year. I mean, when people say like, oh, we need tracks that are more conducive towards tight tandem, I'm pretty sure that Dean and Osbo and many others, Vaughn and Chelsea, have shown that tight tandem has pretty much occurred at pretty much every track. So, but on the topic of tracks, we have some huge changes this year. We are officially losing Irwindale by the looks of it, right?
That's right.
That is right. And we've added Vegas.
That's correct as well.
We'll expand on that a little bit. Why Vegas? And is this the same Vegas that we saw previously?
Yeah, I mean, Irwindale, I know everybody's holding on. There's, all kinds of last minute 11th hour rumors about, buying it back and how the guys want to get rid of it. I think we just have to give that up. I mean, granted, we hope that whoever's developing this property is going to crash and burn, and then they do want to sell it for pennies on the dollar. We can all, start a GoFundMe account and we can all buy it back. All, whatever tens of thousands of fans can contribute. That's great. We could get we can get to that point when that happens. But for the season finale, I mean, part of it is that it's routing. We're really sensitive to the way we're routing teams. We're not zigzagging back and forth. I think, even a little shift, we get a lot of complaints about, oh my gosh, you're adding an extra 1,000 miles to a route that we didn't have last year. So we're trying to be very cognizant of that, and also finishing the season at a place that's exciting. That is a road trip, vacation, kind of worthy place to be at. And I think we came down to. We wanted to try and make a Southern California venue work, but we couldn't. Mm-hmm. And I think we settle on Vegas. I think, and the response has been really good. People love going to Vegas, and I think it's a great place to end. There's a lot of promotional opportunities that we can create around it. And we are not looking to do the same layout as we did previously. We're working with the facility now until we get it all kind of, ink sealed and dried and all that. We'll release where that is, but we're not going to be in the drag strip parking lot with the K rails and catch fence. But I think it's something that's going to be fun and entertaining and gives a little bit of a Irwindale-esque feel.
Very cool. Yeah, one of my biggest limitations is that I got onto a Formula Drift Pro team the year after the Vegas event stopped, so I never got to party in Vegas at an FD event. So I'm very excited to hopefully make it to this Vegas closer and see what happens after the lights go off.
Well, you missed out. You missed out on midsummer 115-degree heat. So
yeah, so that is good. That actually is good news too. Is that it's going to be later in the year now too. So Vegas won't be in the middle of July, whenever it was. It'll be at the end and have a higher chance, at least, of not being as destructive hot.
right.
I have a Corey.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to refer to Facebook for this question from Messenger Kevin Shanahan. As we're talking about changes going to 2018, let's talk about Pro 2 for a second. And he says, can we talk about tire manufacturers? Why only
Hold
two?
on, Corey. We're gonna spend a whole bunch of time on Pro 2 after. Let's get Pro 1 out of the way. I don't want to jump all over the place.
Okay, I thought we were just talking about 2018 as a whole, but go ahead. Sorry.
I think we should spend. Pro 2 deserves its own large
Sure,
section.
cool.
I think
All right, then we'll save
let's-
it. I was just going to knock it out, but let's save it.
Way to ruin the show, Corey. Can we just start
No,
over?
way to ruin the show. I could have got this question out of the way, Sam, and then rolled on with it. But
No, because we're going to talk about Pro 2 for a long time. Because I
Okay.
know you, Corey. Corey, you want to talk about Pro 2.
oh, sweet,
Well,
cool.
Hold
We got
your
a whole
horse.
segment.
I do.
Hold your damn horse.
I do have a question regarding the 2018 season and overall. When you guys talk about what's best for the show, so what are the factors to consider as a good show other than close tandems? Like it's smoke, like a lot of smoke is a factor, or like big angle or speed. Like what are the factors that you guys consider so people knows exactly what is it that you guys aiming for in order to give a good show?
Well, I think anecdotally, you can, look at some of the tandems that we've seen, and you could qualify that as this is good tandem. I think that is kind of an innate thing that we all walk away from when we see an incredible battle, whether it's a great tandem from A to Z or whether it's a crazy crash. I think there are levels of excitement in drifting that we can all point to, but. So I wouldn't say more angle or more speed or any of that kind of stuff. I think generally speaking, we all have a good idea that when we see two guys knocking each other out, drifting up inside the pocket on somebody else and then pulling out of a corner and then, pulling into the pocket on the next side, we can all pretty much agree, I think, intuitively that that's awesome. But, what makes a good show is that plus how it flows. And the flow side of things is something that we really try to work on as much as we can, but also keep in mind the fairness side of things. And sometimes those things come into deep conflict. And it's really hard to figure out the best way to move forward because nobody wants to wait around 15 minutes at the end of a bracket while we let somebody, expire their competition timeout plus their 10 because they weren't at fault. So, we look at those things and we say, are there ways that we can make the show better by refining those type of things without taking away the fairness factor? And sometimes we have to make really hard decisions in that. That will be good for the fans, good for the sport overall, but maybe it's a different kind of structure in the rule book that, might hurt a driver in a particular circumstance. And that, I think a lot of that just comes from seeing what transpires on course, because there's an infinite amount of possibilities when it comes to competition. And some of them are more common than others, but a lot of times every single year we see something brand new. And then we have to consider, should we deal with that in a different kind of way next time around, or is the way that we handled it sufficient?
Okay, real quick, before we get into the deeper general points of what is good drifting, Paco, you're killing me. Let's stay on the topic of schedule for 1 second before we talk about what drifting is. Round 6, St. Louis. What's that about? I know you guys have brought up when we talked to Jim, I think at his house. You guys brought up the desire to have something in that area of the country. What's going on? And it says St. Louis or Montreal. So what's with that?
Yeah, it's not finalized yet. I mean, obviously we've had great results in Montreal the last few years. I think the fan base there is really awesome. But I think we pointed out before, I mean, it's holistically, it's not, if it was just centered around us and where we want to go and what's easier for us or what's going to, be, whatever, more profitable, then we would just, kind of lock the doors at the office and decide and go. But holistically, there's multiple pieces that's involved, right? There are sponsors that are not just spending money in the series, but they're spending a lot of money getting their activation, the rigs, or their people to various tracks. And there's definitely teams that are investing in traveling. And like I said, we're cognizant about routing. So if you take into those parties in mind, the reason why Montreal is in question is mainly because of that, is because the cost to get across the border is quite high for obviously bigger setups. There's a tire manufacturer that had to ship tires in from Japan because it was cheaper than bringing tires across the border. So when you consider those things, it's really challenging for us to figure out how to bridge those issues. We issued subsidies to teams, travel subsidies to teams this past season. It didn't seem to be enough. So it's not like we have unlimited resources to, hey, everybody's custom fees and fuel and water crossing, this and that is going to be, handled by the series. That's not realistic. So thus we have now, St. Louis as a contention because operating within U.S. borders just is logistically more feasible. Right. Teams to get around, things like that is easier. The facility is interesting because it's operated by a gentleman that was in Las Vegas and knows how we operate. They have a facility that has tons of room for Pro 2, car show, team activation, sponsor activation, etc.
And what facility is this?
Gateway Motorsports Park.
Cool.
And the routing seems to work out. So again, we're kind of in the final stages of making the last call on the decision to do that. But that's truly what's been kind of on our to-do list, on our debate list in the office ever since this year's Montreal race.
And I think the Formula Drift Canada stuff, it seems kind of like I don't want to say leftover, but that was, I think, when your guys' focus was a little bit different when you're trying to propagate this whole World Series thing that was going to be a global Formula Drift. And I feel like you guys have kind of shifted away from that idea and maybe making a separate, Japan Formula Drift and an American Formula Drift rather than a whole World Series. Is that still something you're trying to do, or are you focusing now more on just making the American Series and other series great?
Yeah, I think we had kind of World Series, World Championship aspirations, and we tried to do that. Finding right promotional partners internationally is difficult. I don't want to spend too much time on it. You guys have other stuff to talk about, but we had a great deal that would have happened in China, but the party that we dealt with basically broke their contract and threw a wrench in our whole 3-year plan of kind of international series. But we also realized that, we were spending a lot of time overseas, which, again, it's great in spreading the brand and the sport, but the core of it is the primary Pro Series, and we have to keep it as healthy and as strong as possible. And so part of the shift is to focus on, Formula Drift, the Pro Championship, and Japan was growing, so Japan operates separately, so it's a, Formula Drift Japan Championship. And we have the same partners in Canada that operate the Formula Drift Canada Championship.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of the big things that you mentioned previously, is that a lot of the drivers had said that it didn't make sense for their sponsorship packages to travel to Canada since there's different budgets. If it's a large sponsor or if it's a small sponsor, they just don't sell their product in Canada. So I'm all for a expansion within the U.S. I'm excited to hopefully see that event crop up. What are there any guys? Do you have any more track questions, Paco? Rory?
No, actually, I'm just curious about what Las Vegas is gonna be like if it's gonna be one of the old layouts, or is you guys bring in a new layout, or what we saw Matt Field running during SEMA, was that like a teaser of what's potentially gonna be the layout for Vegas?
Possible. Yeah, they have the main oval, right? The NASCAR oval, and then that has an infield road course. They have a outer road course that Vegas Drift and Southwest Drift Series have run on before. They have another outside road course that Exotic Racing runs on. They have K-Rail and Catch Fence that have been brought in for what we used to run in essentially the paddock area of the drag strip. And they have a short course paved oval that's on the, I guess, the south end of the facility. The portion of the venue we're choosing also comes with some, I guess, facility improvements. We're looking at paving additional parts to make the course flow better. So we're in the process of sending a couple guys out there with the pavement company to look at where and how much it's going to cost. And once we do that, then we can kind of give you guys the final layout and what part of the multi-use facility we're going to be using.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that, and not to give anything away, is our aspiration, our goals with regards to Vegas is to try to make it as Irwindale-esque as we can in all shapes and forms. And because it's the end of the year, because it's the final event of the year, because we're trying to mimic the feeling of Irwindale as much as we can, that's part of what our inspiration is in what we're trying to do in Vegas.
Well, yeah, and hopefully, hopefully it pays its due to Irwindale, but hopefully it becomes its own beautiful, unique event for the next decade and a half of drifting or longer. So, are there any major rule changes and any other major procedural changes we can expect for Pro 1 in 2018?
From my recollection, I think some of the technical regulations have already gone out, at least in the first draft. I don't know that there's anything that's like totally substantive to change the game. I think there's probably some refinements. There was also some items that we had that were delayed until 2018 that we announced in 2017. So those will probably go into effect. I think more of the bigger adjustments, if I read Kevin right, are things that are more related to Pro 2. Pro 2 has kind of become kind of a testing ground for us to see how things might potentially work in Pro, not in its entirety, but in certain aspects, with tire size and different ways to kind of try to take a series that is a non-spec series and try to make these cars as equal as possible without having to go to something that's completely spec and then takes the, kind of the cool and sexiness out of drifting, which is what we don't want to do. So trying to come up with formulations that make sense for everybody, that still give OEs opportunities to participate in the series, that incentivize them to participate in the series, but still allow us to do what we want to do with the sport with as many chassis as possible, is basically kind of the inspiration behind what's going to come out in the technical regulations. But in terms of specifics, I don't know that there is going to be anything that's super, super big that is unknown at this point.
Right.
I have a question real quick from Kenshiro Gushi, a first-time caller, long-time listener. He's asking if those rules changes, are you guys going to allow open face helmets?
Yes, I'll tell Ken that. I'll tell you the same thing that I told Ken when he texted me. That was talk to Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to get Ken Gushi's pretty face ruined by some flying debris, but I just remember that Ken Gushi likes to have his windows all the way rolled up so he can smell his own farts. What he told me.
Well, I think if I remember correctly, he was saying that because we have Hans now, maybe that it's okay to have open face helmets and that he could do something with that. So I mentioned that he should definitely talk to Kevin about that.
That sounds like a hard no, Ken, but good luck with your fight.
Yeah, good luck, Ken.
Since the conversation keeps on, I think gravitating towards Pro 2 because I think that's a very hot topic at the moment. Are there any other Pro 1 things that we should know about, guys, or do you want to move into the big debate of Pro 2?
I mean, one thing I'll say about the sporting regulations is that has not come out yet, and we do an overhaul of sporting regulations, which is pretty much where the rubber meets the road in terms of what a lot of the forward-facing things that fans see, how we label things, how we term things, how we do judging, and we're going through basically a complete rehaul of that. So my feeling is that there's not going to be a crazy amount of changes, but there certainly could be some, because what I get from the judges, and especially the crew that goes out to Japan, and even some influence from Robbie Nishida, who's on those trips with us as well, is we get to see the way that the competition goes here in the States, but then we also get to see the way it breaks down in Japan. And so we get almost kind of like a double amount of drifting in a high level competition. And from that, we were able to take some of those things that happen and say, maybe we should do this better, or maybe the way that we present this is not the right way, or what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? So I think the sporting regulations will certainly have some changes in them. I don't know how much it'll actually change the way that we do competition, but I would expect that in the coming months, usually by January or February, there'll be some changes out there. And we always do a really long, here are the changes that you'll see in the sporting regulations with all the teams. We, even after we send it out, it's always highlighted in red so they can see the changes, and then we go through them bit by bit. Usually at the first round in Long Beach.
A lot of it too is learning from. We always say you can't prepare for. There's so many what ifs, and always these scenarios always pop up that. At the end of the day, we're trying to streamline the show because we're trying to make it as entertaining for fans as possible. But as Ryan alluded to before, is how do you make it fair for competitors, but keep the show going? And oftentimes we run into these issues of, well, what if this happened and that, and sometimes we can't predict it. And so as it happens, we learn from it, and we have to then streamline it and make it efficient and put it into the rule book. Again, especially the sporting side, is that, when a competition happens, what are the different things that are happening, and we have to have some rules and regulations to deal with that, and again, keep the show going.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is what happened with Dean and Odie in the at Irwindale this year, because it was deemed Odie at fault for wrecking up Dean's car, and Dean had his 10 minutes to fix his car, and then his 5 minutes to fix his car, and still couldn't, unfortunately. And of course, it would have been an incredible battle to see Dean versus Wiechek. And for the record, I think Peter would have won based off his driving that night. But we didn't get to see it because Dean couldn't fix his car in time. But I feel like if you would have let him fix his car entirely, maybe the show would have dragged on longer. And now it's already a lot of downtime. Is there any way to smooth that out and going on forward, or we just kind of have to be fair to the drivers and with respect to the show, we just kind of have to keep going on?
Yeah, I mean, that one in particular, there's even a deeper one than that. The deeper one is Ken versus the other Dean, Carney, where Ken slid through his oil spill and then went into the wall. Now, this is a scenario where there was actually no contact. Right. So there was no way. Mostly when these things happen, there's a collision or contact, and then we can go to the rule book and say, okay, here's what the next steps are. And in that case, you would assign fault. Right. But there was no contact here, and so the question was, well, what do we do with it? Well, we all basically came to the conclusion that it was still Dean's fault. Whether or not he did it accidentally, not intentionally, but he did it accidentally, or or the car was just breaking down. Had his car not done that, Ken probably wouldn't have gone into the wall. So we had to give Dean the fault there, and because of that, Ken was in a very similar situation to the other Dean, James Dean. And I think what we kind of recognize from that we're kind of toying with is that maybe the non at fault 10 minutes plus the competition timeout is too much time. That usually in all these cases, and we can look at all these cases, is that we pretty much know that the car's not going to be able to make it, and so we can just move on and not ride that out. And part of how we've been able to ride that out a little bit is we have Lorette down there, we have a camera down there, so we can bring some level of entertainment to it. But if you have two of those 15-minute scenarios on one side of the bracket, that certainly can drag on. And I think maybe we can probably address that better.
I mean, it would be super unfortunate, though, if a driver that is on the fast track to kicking ass or needs these points gets knocked out incidentally by another driver. And I mean, and I hate to see this ever happen, but there might be an event, arguably once again, because some people think that this has happened previously, of a driver intentionally taking out another driver to end his run. And that can totally happen in this circumstance if you allow that. And again, you try not to cater to such malicious behavior, but it is a possibility when you do not allow drivers that are not in fault to not continue.
Yeah, and intention is always the hardest thing to prove. But I think in the case of Dean Carney versus Ken, it was pretty clear that, had that oil not dropped, Ken wouldn't have gone into the wall. And so it was a total bad luck scenario for Ken that, pretty much ruined his weekend. But we had to have some way to move forward there. And the logical way to do it was to assign fault to Dean. It's just the fact that it took too long that it became a problem.
Yeah.
I got two things real quick. Going back to a statement that Ken just wrote in the chat. He goes, if a latchable part opening up is considered a zero, why isn't an oil spill considered a zero? Or oil spill should be considered a zero. That was kind of an interesting statement. You know, if something is...
well, that's exactly what I was talking about, right? It's that you almost can't predict every scenario that can potentially unfold on a competition weekend. And there has to be a first, and this was
right.
In my mind, this is kind of the first of its kind.
Yeah.
There are also those that treat that as it's a pure mechanical failure, that the competitor was not able to keep the car in operational form, and thus,
Correct.
Engine blew, oil spill, and creating kind of chaos. And so now we have to write regulation that will deal with a future scenario that's similar to that.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Or you keep it loose enough to define oil spill rather than writing something specific. Like if you spill oil, it's a zero. You can just say a mechanical failure and then leave it up to the judges and you guys to determine what then is mechanical failure, which I think is probably the right path.
Correct. And so in that case, that Kearney's team probably would not agree to that. Would say that, hey, it's like anything that happens on track. We can't make sure the car runs at 100% through the entire run and the entirety of the weekend. But maybe the more efficient and the quicker process should have been, it's a mechanical failure or similar to a trunk unlatching and it's an automatic zero. We've decided to move on, and it goes and the show goes on very quickly, and we deal with Ken and fixing the car and trying to get to the next part of the competition.
Yeah, and you also don't want to divorce yourself from cause and effect too much, because the cause of Ken crashing was clearly Dean spilling the oil, and the effect of that was him going into the wall. If the roles were reversed and Ken had dropped oil at the finish line 1 foot in front of the finish line, and a camera picked that up, but it was nothing. Nothing else happened, and we have a hard and fast rule in there that says you dropped oil on the ground. Now all of a sudden we're committed to that. So
that's a good point.
You want to make sure that what you're saying doesn't actually pigeonhole you into something that, from an intuitive perspective as a fan, you're like, nah, that would be BS, because that guy actually beat that guy, but all he did was drop a little oil at the finish line.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And every team will argue these like very hyper specific issues when it's they're on the end of it. But like if they weren't on the end of it in the bigger picture, they'd probably be like, they have their own opinion. I'm just saying that they have every member of the sport, every team has an opinion on something, and that opinion is often radicalized once they are on the receiving end of what they consider a bad call of that opinion. So,
a great scenario to that would be like a tire debeating. You know what I mean? Like they can run a great qualifying run, and then at the end of the run, tire debeats, and it's obviously all thrown out the window. I was like, dang it, that kind of sucks, but you were so close. Very interesting conversation. My other piece that I wanted to bring up about the flow of the show and things like that, and I know it's kind of like a sensitive topic in some degree, because a lot of people hate this and some people like it, is the third place finisher is based off a qualifying position. And how do you feel removing that third place battle has affected the show or helped the show?
Yeah, I mean, I think drifting fans in general want to see more and more and more runs, right? As many tandem battles as possible. But I think people also forget, and I am more of a proponent for the no third place run, because essentially at no part in the weekend, and again, this may be just my personal opinion, at no part in the weekend or any competition do you ever put two drivers that have lost to battle to get a position. And we forget that in the past, a lot of the slowdown and the waiting came in that the second pair, right? There's four. This guy, the first pair, the winner moves on and the loser is the loser. And then the second pair, the winner moves on and the loser has to immediately turn around and get right into competing for that third place. And so if there was a crash, if there was a wreck, if there was something breaking, If simply they were not ready, they need to cool the car down, they need to change the tires, they need to refuel. Just that in itself, just to get the third place run going, took 10, 15 minutes to get on track. Then you've taken all the air out of the momentum.
Yeah.
And you've taken it away from the final battle because you're spending all this time to set up the third place battle.
As much as there could have been some cool third place battles, I fully agree. I didn't agree with it necessarily when it was stated, and we were just talking semantics about rules on paper. I was like, oh, we're gonna miss so many good battles, and maybe we have missed some good battles. But I totally agree with the flow of the show requires no third place battle because when you have the momentum for that finals to go on, and then you have to do this third place battle that is its own isolated thing. Like, let's say it goes one more time, then you're waiting another 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and let's say it goes one more time again, and it just completely can ruin the momentum of the entire show. And as I think the priority of the series and the sport becomes making the tightest, best show possible, I think there's no place for that third place battle anymore, and fully agree with that.
Interesting theories.
Well, what do you think, Corey? What's your personal?
No, it depends on what perspective I'm looking at. If I'm looking at it as a event organizer, or am I looking at it as a driver? Because if I'm a driver that qualified,
well, you're not really a driver though, so don't worry about it.
Well, if I was a driver, I would say if I got in the show, and I squeaked in the show, I stayed up all night, had mechanical fares, I qualified 31st, and I was able to work my way up to that third point spot. But since I had a bad qualifying, and that was what took me away from the podium, driver's side, I'd be very upset.
Qualify better.
Absolutely, but once again, there's always those scenarios where something could mechanically happen, or I squeaked through, or we talked about this. Yeah, I came around the last corner, engine blew up, and I barely finished the run. Made me,
made better car.
So yeah, there's always those arguments, right? But I'm just saying, as a driver's side, I would prefer to have it because I still have that last shot of trying to make the podium. But
yeah, this was a very contentious issue in the office for sure. I mean, everybody thinks that we agree about everything, but we don't. And I was on the side of wanting to keep it for a long period of time until I saw what Jim referred to, and that was somebody showing me the math of how long the variation can be in having a third place battle, from between 30 extra minutes to up to an hour long potential between having a third battle with another one more time, a crash, an oil spill, all that kind of stuff. And at that time when we were thinking about implementing that, we were really, really looking into the possibility of trying to do a very scaled live show. Most people probably don't remember this, but we had a 3D deal on a network that's not around anymore. And one of the complaints about that was like, hey, you guys can't predict how long your top 32 is going to be because you have this thing at the very end that can introduce a 45-minute window, and we just can't deal with that. So that made us think about that. And now I'm a proponent of not having it, even though, yes, I'm sure we missed out on some great battles.
Right.
But we also have strengthened the way that the sport can actually function and work in terms of it being able to be a popular sport that can be branded and monetized by drivers and fans. If you bring somebody to a show that's never seen it before, and everything is going in a certain pattern, and then you get to this one point and all of a sudden it just changes dramatically and you lose people, because let's just say you have a Dean Carney-Ken incident where all of a sudden you have a 45-minute window before you get to the finals. You've just shot the show.
Yeah. And that was an unfortunate aspect of Irwindale that of course we can try to smooth out, but it's tough to tiptoe that line of being fair versus making a good show.
I think Brian has a question. Brian?
Yeah, just a quick thought. And I know this is a long shot, Jim and Ryan, but as Formula Drift progresses as a professional motorsport, the gauge of the money that's being involved and the programs developing, these drivers their skill has also been developing tenfold each year to where they're drifting super close to each other at really high speeds. So the consequences we're seeing from even the slightest little error is going straight into a crash that basically DNFs the car, even though the driver wasn't at fault. The case mentioned with Gucci and Dean. So just the thought, what is the possibility if a driver is proven not at fault, but his car gets totaled, about having a backup car as a legal option to continue moving the show so he doesn't have to wait? He can still move along. There's no buy runs.
Yeah, in principle, I don't know how you feel about it, Jim, but in principle, I don't see an issue with that, as long as it can go through all the proper technical specifications and, it's been teched and we have this codified into the rule book, I don't really see an issue with that in principle. I don't know how realistic it is for certain teams to do that, but it's interesting.
It's unfortunate. I mean, it's nearly impossible, I think, for most drivers to transport another car, let alone field another Pro 1 level car.
Right, I'm talking years ahead, too. Keep in mind, as the sport develops and, say, the programs for everybody is reaching like a minimum where that could actually be possible. I mean, just consideration of the thought of how this could move the show forward is really what I'm trying to produce.
Well, scenario would that be, Brian, is like obviously you have these guys building these new cars for this year. You have Matt Field going in the Corvette. His S14 is sitting there as is, competition ready. Why couldn't he take that? There's a couple scenarios where drivers do have their previous car still sitting in the garage, kind of like, man, this is an incentive now for me to brush the dust off of it and get it to where, hey, at least I do have something to drive.
Right.
Or you look at that crash of Matt Field and Dean in Orlando, or not Orlando, but Canada, where it's like Matt ratcheted strapped his engine to the subframe, pulled the exhaust off, took the supercharger off to do a run. Like, wouldn't it make more sense to pull the backup car out if he had the resources to do that?
Right.
One, safety, and then two, being able to speed up the whole process of the show.
It'd definitely be
That's
sweet
interesting
if people can afford to do it and the series progresses to that point. I think that would be an okay thing.
Yeah, or also a case like when Forsberg lent his car to Mad Mike and he couldn't compete because his official car was already across the line. Like, I think it would be a better show if you guys allow that kind of stuff. Like, you know what? Like, it's okay. Like, every driver is allowed to swap one car per race or per season or something like that.
There could be a trade-off for a 5-minute or 10-minute repair, or you swap cars, but you don't get a chance to repair the car if that car ends up wrecking in the next battle.
I think that's always really good. It's always like there's always a good intent and a good idea, and then it's really like if you wanted to map out how that would unfold, right? So what you guys were saying, what was interesting is we're going down the path of like, in the future as teams and the sport grows, the potential of adding kind of, bringing along spare cars in the case that we deem, a car is not fixable, but that driver moves on. Say again, in the case of Ken, that if there was a backup car, he can get in that car and be ready to go. Show continues, he continues. What then happens too? It's like we have to think about we always get caught in these like what if scenarios.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And your idea about maybe once a year doing this kind of that's actually fairly that's probably more realistic and more reasonable as well. What we don't want is in the case of, I think Paco, you mentioned with Mad Mike, and that sucked. Like for us as the organizers, we want him in the show, right? He is one of the more popular drivers in the series. Why wouldn't we? And I'm sure out there the fans were yelling at us and screaming at us for like, oh, your rules suck and you guys shouldn't have done that. But let's think the other way. Let's always think the other way, that if we allowed him to do that for the sake of
that he's popular,
the show. Yeah. What precedent are we setting for the driver that takes advantage of that, saying,
right,
oh, I was just testing, I'm sorry, but I have this other car, so can I run this other car? And they actually turn it the other way and take advantage of what was supposed to be a good gesture into something that they take for granted, and they're using it as an advantage.
Yeah, it can turn into a loophole.
Well, fans often want it all ways. They want to see their driver no matter what, and they want to see ultimate fairness across the board. And of course, they'll still criticize you guys nonstop for supporting quote unquote big sponsored drivers. But at the same time, when you guys enact the rules upon them fairly, then someone loves a big name driver that gets knocked out early. Then of course they yell and scream. So it's you guys are doing the difficult job of being the bad guys here. But
do you think it would be doable to just, like, when a situation like that comes, just ask the drivers, like, hey guys, are you okay if we allow this? And if the drivers, or at least most of the drivers, are like, yeah, that's totally cool, or we're not against that.
There's no time to implement that though.
Right.
I know, you're saying if there was a time.
Yeah. Well, I would say if you want a hypothetical scenario that could be plausible, you could say, let's just say Brian's scenario extrapolates out into the future, and that's what it is, that teams have enough resources to assign a backup car or something like that, and they're traveling around with 2 cars. Let's just say that is the case. That would be really interesting if the series got to that level. But let's just say that that's an example. You can assign an official backup car. Let's say this is my official backup car. It's gone through all the tech. It goes through the tech at the beginning of each event because there's a possibility that you might need that car. Then I could see, yeah, sure, why not? That I don't see a real issue with that. I think we need to. Devil's always in the details, but if it is for the betterment of the show and everybody's on the same page and it makes sense for the drivers, then yeah, I could see that potentially being something.
I totally understand the point that Jim was making as well about there's always somebody out there who could possibly take an advantage of a rule change. But the same could be said about the acceleration, deceleration zones when that was introduced. I'm sure that was brought up as well, but you went forward with that decision to assign those zones, understanding that drivers could take advantage of that. But there's like an honor system among the drivers to generally not do that, follow the rules and drift how you're supposed to drift in competition. The same could be said about doing an honor system with a spare car.
So in an effort to make sure we get to, I think, what is the most important next topic of Pro 2, I think as originally planned, let's save these large hypotheticals that can last for hours of discussions until the end of the show, just so we can keep you guys on as long as we can. But let's get into Pro 2, please, because we have a ton to talk about there. Corey, fire us off.
You made me forget my question, Sam.
Shut the fuck up.
That's what happens. That's what happens when you interrupt, Sam.
Yeah. So again, I want to get to those big questions of drifting and stuff at the end of the show. But I want to give Pro 2 its due time because there's so much talk about Pro 2 recently. And
well, before we do that, like how's in your guys' eyes, how's Pro 2 been with you guys? You know, Ryan and Jim, like starting that series. What was kind of the idea behind it? And what's the outcome, and how do you feel about it now currently in its state?
I think after this past season, I think what we envision Pro 2 to be is on its way, is well on its way. I think in creating Pro 2, it came from Pro-Am drivers transitioning to Pro Series. The gap was too large. If you were running a 4-round series in, that happened across 3 states, and then you jump into a 8-round, at that point 7-round championship that takes you, 11,000 miles across the country. It's a very different program. Forget the driving part of it, just the budgeting, logistics, operation, and just running kind of like a mini business on its own was a huge feat in itself. And then to learn the driving at new tracks and driving with pro level drivers, et cetera, et cetera. So the gap and the learning curve was just too big. And so we thought that, well, look, let's create an in-between series, and thus we created the Pro 2 series. And the first couple of years, there were a lot of there was a handful of pro drivers that kind of did both to help retain their pro license so they can go back and forth. Yep. And I think Pro 2 has grown into its own. We've tried out things like this past year with a spec tire width to bring parity and some easy kind of cost savings, keep without cars without getting to be gobs of horsepower, and keep that kind of in line that's manageable within what we can do. Still giving them track time on the same weekends as pro rounds, live streaming the Pro 2 competitions, etc. It's grown. I think this past year we all felt that this was probably the most entertaining and most competitive Pro 2 season that we've had since starting Pro 2.
Definitely. Yeah, it seems closest to what it probably should be. Corey, do you have your question before we talk about it? I think tires is the biggest thing I want to talk about Pro 2 because that's a big deal with the implementing of what you just discussed and what you're going to be bringing out for 2018. But Corey, get it out there, dude.
Yeah, no, because this is actually from Kevin Shannon. It was a Facebook message. He says, can we talk about tire manufacturers? Why only 2 brands for Pro 2? What if another driver runs a certain brand due to the ability or whatever? Can they run, or is it a monopoly?
So it's back kind of half space.
Which is
what is this new rule with the tire? What are you changing for Pro 2 for tires for 2018?
Yeah,
sorry, go Ryan.
Okay. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't describe it as a monopoly. The way that we came to where we are right now with Pro 2 and the tires is in consultation with the tire manufacturers and in consultation with the tire manufacturers about the best way to set parameters for Pro 2 and eventually having a bridge that gets to Pro. And one of the things that we need to address in Pro 2 is cost structure and parity. And by parity, I mean trying to keep the field as level as possible. And in the cost structure side of things, if we go and do a deal with one, a single tire manufacturer, or two in this particular case, we can offer a guaranteed price point with mounting and servicing at the events that the drivers would otherwise not be able to get on their own, because we're leveraging the power of the series to do something for the tire manufacturers. And in exchange for that, they're guaranteeing a price that can then be passed on to the Pro 2 guys. So at the end of the day, they save money. And then we also are able to develop a case study about what happens when you have tires with the same compound at a certain type of size and put them into competition on these cars that are at a Pro 2 level. And then from there, we can actually extrapolate forward and try to figure out if there are other things, other modifications we want to make to the rule in order to create more parity, since we now have some kind of cost saving structure in place. So that's the general broad idea of what this is all about. And we're interested to see how it all plays out next year.
So extremely simplified, though, what is it? What are the size rules and what are the manufacturer rules for tires?
It is 255, I believe, or 265.
I think it's a
Damn it, Jim.
255.
Where are your notes?
255.
255, 40,
with
255,
right,
35.
and with Achilles and Nexon as being the suppliers. Now, one thing I would add too is that, and I hope I didn't miss it, but it's when you leave it open for, again, you have to think about all the various parts that evolve around a series. How, a tire company can't produce a certain spec and size and in a certain inventory off the fly. So there has to be some predictability in that. And so when you allow kind of an open-ended kind of tire system, the lack of a controlled environment, it may seem that it's helpful because anybody can run anything, or you could choose amongst so many different manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens is, sometimes it's hard to keep up with inventory. If your brand is in demand, you may run out of inventory. And then what happens to drivers that rely on purchasing or using your product? So there are those type of, kind of more boring behind the scenes issues that are involved as well. And it does carry over to Pro as well. No, it's not a monopoly, but we have to create a controlled environment because you can't allow any brand.
Right.
I know they support the team, so it's hard to say this without not that we don't consider that, but you can't allow any brand to kind of just randomly walk in without understanding what it is they're bringing to the table, without them kind of having skin in the game and responsibility and accountability to say, look, this is a tire that we're bringing to the series. We're planning to sell it. This is an off-the-shelf product. This is not a custom product. This is not a custom molded. This is not our compound. This is not something that's not sold anywhere else.
We need to emphasize it's about fairness. It's about like homologation. It's about the idea that you need to have a standard product that is available widely.
Right. It's a balance between having homologation, but also having parity and some diversity in brands. We don't want to go to a single make tire supplier. We're not going to do that. We understand that multiple brands competing and playing in the field is good for the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So why limit the brands in Pro 2?
Well, for one thing, this is Human asked this question in the chat. For one thing, these were the two brands that were already supporting about 95% of the teams, maybe even 100% of the teams. Achilles was highly dominant in that. And these two brands are the ones that were willing to make the commitment to have the inventory and to have the price. The other brands, we talked to all the brands. We let them know that we were going this direction, but these two brands in particular are willing to step up and support Pro 2 in this particular capacity.
And I feel like this is beneficial for most of the lower guys too, because one of the biggest concerns I think for an entry level Pro 2 program is of course tires, and this is going to save those guys money hopefully.
Absolutely. I mean, there's as far as I know, of all the brands that are in the series, we can pretty much guarantee that the price point that they're going to get is going to be lower than what they're already paying, or at least what they're already paying, depending on what deal they have. But most likely, it's going to be lower than what they're already paying.
So, sorry, Ryan, to cut you off. So, for example, if a new team comes in to Pro 2 from Pro-Am, they can reach out to either one of these tire manufacturers and get immediately right on one of those two programs.
Yeah, not only that not only will they get that price, they'll also get the on-site service. So the servicing is going to be done by the brands on-site as well. So it's basically a turnkey program, and it's going to take a lot of commitment from those brands to be able to do that. The other question that I saw that Kevin was asking in the chat is, if he had a $500,000 program, would he just be lost and not be able to do anything? One of the reasons why we decided to go down this route is because, as far as we know, a $500,000 program for Pro 2 does not exist.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I didn't want to address that question because it is extreme. But let's say, what if?
Kevin is just being silly.
But I mean, it's not a silly question, because what if there is a driver that has a crazy relationship with one of these brands, and he's with Falcon, and Falcon wants to support his whole program, but he can only run Falcon tires? Let's work backwards from that proposition. If there was a driver that was able to support a $500,000 program in some other part of the world, you would naturally think that driver would not be a Pro-Am or Pro 2 driver. They would probably be qualified for Pro, and then thus they should petition for Pro. Yeah. And you have that petition option available, is that if they already have that level of support and presumably driver skill and program, they can then petition for Pro 1. So yeah, I feel like the Pro 2 brand tire thing is an easy point of contention for the internet people that like to bitch about things. Not to belittle their ideas, but I mean, it is something that on the surface can be seen as poor, but I think as with most decisions most of you guys in the series make, is that once you consider what it actually means in execution, I think it's probably a good thing for most drivers, in that you get this guaranteed support for tires, and you get this fairness across the board of what people are available and having to run. And if you do run well in Pro 2 with the Achilles or Nexon, I imagine they're going to up their support for Pro 1, and they're going to support you in the future.
Yeah, I think the bottom line, I think, with this is there is not a scenario that I'm aware of where somebody in Pro 2 right now is going to have a more raw deal than what is going to be happening in the future. There's no Pro 2 driver that's actually getting cash as a sponsorship, that they're no longer going to be able to do that. And all of that was part of us vetting this whole process out. What this should do is give drivers a great competition tire at a lower price than what they're already paying, plus have the service. And then they can develop the relationship with that brand as they want to make their way to Pro. If there is an international driver that has a relationship with another a brand that's outside of the ones that already exist in the Pro Series, we have a process for which that can take place. And, it's highly probable that we're going to see new tire manufacturers in the series in the future, maybe even next year. And I'm sure we'll have more to say about that in the coming months. But we have that process already in place. So I wouldn't be worried about that if somebody has that we're going to be missing out on a top level driver somewhere because he can't get his tire manufacturer into the Pro Series.
Well, you also have to commend Achilles and Nexon to put in the effort to do this.
Yeah.
Because Falcon, Hankook, Nitto can snatch up any of these up-and-coming drivers that have been either on, Team Achilles or Team Nexon for the Pro 2 season, and they can swoop in and grab them for Pro the following season.
Yeah.
But they are playing their part and contributing to, again, the development of the sport and of the series and new drivers and so forth. And if there is that $500,000 program, like other motorsports, you can go through different routes to get to the same end. So if you want to go run Formula D Japan and win the championship there, there isn't it's open tire brands there, and Top 8, just like Pro 2 here, gets a Pro license. So if you really have that type of resource, then you can go run and dominate in Japan, and then come to the Pro Series with a Pro license.
Yeah, and I think in a loose summary, at least of my feelings on it, is just that there might be some circumstance, yes, of course, where this rule might hurt a hypothetical someone, but the overarching good of the rule, I think displays itself, and I think this is going to be largely beneficial for nearly, if not everyone,
Right.
but that hypothetical person.
Well,
and I guess we'll cross that road if that hypothetical person exists. But
Well, a quick question on top of it. Did you guys mention pricing at the SEMA press conference or no?
We didn't know.
Okay. Cool.
the people have been floating numbers. I've heard some internet people, get crazy about how much this is all going to cost them. But
So
$500 a tire? Is
is there going to be a mandatory amount they need to buy per event, or what's the rule with the tires price?
No, I don't think that there's going to be a mandatory amount that they have to buy. I don't even think that we're going to even restrict tires that they want to buy for testing. That was one of the things we were talking about this morning in our staff meeting was, would we be able to allow drivers to buy tires for testing preseason? And as far as I know, I don't think that that's going to be an issue either. So once these guys establish the relationship with the tire manufacturer, and a lot of the details are still left to come, but the broad strokes of it is that this should be beneficial for pretty much everybody. I have not found a scenario yet, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, where somebody is going to come out on the raw side of this.
So I'm going to be a real quick Ryan Sage interpreter and tell the internet kids to calm the fuck down. The rumors you've heard about tire prices are not true. This is pretty much going to help everyone. So just chill.
So question, for example, let's suppose this a real quick hypothetical, but let's suppose Tri-Ace, which was Josh Robinson's tire sponsor. Let's say they want to become a tire sponsor for next season on Pro 2. Would they be at some point obligated to take other drivers who want to join their program, or how do they, like in between the two, or if this case 3 brands, how do they decide who approves which driver to sponsor in this case? You know what I'm saying?
Sure. That process is being finalized, and because there's 2 brands that we're working with, and we want to make sure that it's fairly even keel across the board. There are, we've talked about different ideas, so I don't want to jump the gun and get to that, but we're finalizing that. We have the pricing, we haven't released it, but we're going to release it with all the information, the final schedule. Here's the tire pricing. This is how you hook up with each of the brands. Is it going to be a lottery thing? Is it going to be part of your registration where you choose which brand you want to be on? We're going to get to all that as quickly as possible, because I know there's a lot of Pro 2 teams they're preparing for next season, and they've already contacted either Nexon or Achilles about getting on board with them. So we'll get to that. I mean, I would maybe bring it back a little bit, is that so we have 5 Pro Tire partners, and they were given the offer to become the tire suppliers for Pro 2. Some submitted, some did not. It came down to Nexon and Achilles. A manufacturer like Tri-Ace or any other manufacturer aside from the current 5, they could have joined the Pro program and thus be eligible to bid or to offer a proposal to be the Pro 2 supplier. So I think it's kind of, in your Tri-Ace kind of scenario, it's convoluted. So, Tri-Ace, in a way, had to be a part of the Pro series and then have submitted a proposal or matched the other suppliers to be a supplier for Pro 2. And then thus we go into how they support and bring on drivers and who gets how many drivers, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of brands were already talking to us. And they were given that opportunity. So what you see is what unfolded.
I'll mention this. I know the tire pricing, and it is cheaper than what I was paying for tires when I was in Pro 1, and I was working with the direct manufacturer.
Wow.
I'll say that.
Wow.
And one other thing to add that I think is really cool is that we have not implemented, nor have those 2 manufacturers asked for any type of restrictions on programs that relate to sponsorship in Pro 2. So if you're Corey Hosford and you've got so many downloads on Maximum Driftcast and you're just killing the game all day, you need to drop a dime on some sponsorship, you can.
That's true. Amen. Hey, thanks for that plug, Ryan. I know you guys don't usually do much for me, but now you finally did. Thanks.
I would say,
just
honestly, to any potential sponsors of Corey, don't even bother calling him. He's got too many sponsors knocking at the door.
Yeah.
Oh, you
I
guys should
think
see my suit
yeah.
now. It's just one
Yeah.
big piece.
I can't wait to see
Yeah.
a podium and like
So
every
if there's
single
anyone
round. Corey.
interested anyone interested in giving Corey more money, don't even worry about talking to.
Well, see what I did, Sam, is I had to make like a one piece like long skirt, so I had more. I could put more brands.
We got
down
one
the
of
side.
those late '80s big shoulder business suits that you got to add more shoulder pads and more size to the
It's
suit.
called a suit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
to fit your sponsors. It's
Yeah,
not called a
dude.
zoot suit, Paco.
It's a suit.
That's not a zoot
Oh
suit.
god
Paco.
damn it! It's funny.
All right, so Pro 2 is one of those things that I think a lot of people discuss because it's so young and it's so new. How, and Corey has said this on the show multiple times, how do we better represent these drivers? How do we give them more coverage? How do we make them into athletic superstars? Like,
How do we give them the opportunity to have longevity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, we can add this question in there too. What can we also do for the Pro-Am series to develop Pro 2 drivers so they kind of know what
I think
to
that's
expect?
a whole
when they
other
get in?
topic. Let's
I know,
just
that's-
focus on this
but
right now.
preparing
And then
them.
let's get into
I'm just
the
preparing
minor
them,
league.
Sam. I'm preparing them.
Yeah, let me just say one thing that I think that Jim kind of touched on that I want to emphasize a little bit deeper is that when we started Pro 2, actually when we started the Pro Series, the pyramid was an upside down pyramid. It was like that, not like this. There was no foundation whatsoever, no Pro-Am, no Pro 2. It was Pro Series and that was it. And it's because of that, we kind of had to work backwards and figure out the best way to matriculate young drivers into the Pro Series. And it took us a while to figure out how to do that. And for a while, it was really wild, wild west. And a lot of the pro drivers that have been around for a long time will tell you that. And so when we got into developing Pro 2, we could kind of see a little bit of a pathway about how this would work and be sustainable. And a big chunk of it was integrating it into the Pro Series. And there's a lot of benefits to doing that. And I think that that's something that will stay with the series so long as we can figure out how to do the schedules week in and week out. But in addition to that is now that we have kind of the basic level infrastructure in place and we have some of these Pro 2 drivers that are developing themselves into really good marketers and we're getting more resources for Pro 2. And we're going to have a lot of really cool, exciting announcements in the off season with respect to Pro 2 that I think that it is going to make people very, very excited. And it relates to growing Pro 2 to be its own, not standalone outside of the series, but within the series will be its own particular brand in a stronger way than it is now. And that's pretty much the goal of that as just like a general thing. Now, after once we get to that point, we can try to tackle Pro-Am. That's a completely different topic, but it is related, like you said, Corey, so we should maybe get into that. But I think it's important to understand the history of Pro 2, how it came to be, and what our goals and aspirations are for it as we move on. And I think this next year, building off of what we did in 2017, should be able to give people a better idea of what our long-term plans are for the series.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I mean, I guess in order to maybe do a little bit of a segue here. So Pro 2 was created as an in-between Pro-Am and Pro.
Right.
Now,
Because the gap was too big.
wow, let's talk
Yeah.
about big gaps.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
Easy to
and I agree. But now a lot of people is saying that the gap between nothing and Pro-Am is becoming pretty big. And then now there's like this talk saying that Pro-Am is getting too much like Pro 2 and it's becoming like too expensive and too, like unreachable. Which
So
I personally don't think it's right, but
this has been a topic of much contention recently with some internet videos and what have
Yeah.
you, is the rising cost of this motorsport and the gap of whereas 10 years ago a young kid with an S13, S14 could get into the big leagues with an SR20 and now you can't anymore. So how do we refine this question, Paco?
I guess my
question?
question is at what point is Formula Drift influencing the Pro-Am series where they kind of like give their input and also hear all the Pro-Am series' feedback in order to kind of like create like an even playing field on Pro-Am. It's like, what's the level of involvement on Formula from Formula Drift into all the other Pro-Am series?
Right. I mean,
Sorry.
it's complicated. I mean, long story, as briefly as I guess I could give background to it. One difference is that the difference between Pro 2 and Pro Am is that Pro 2 we operate, right? So it's under our roof, and we are solely responsible. Pro Am is trickier because it's various independent operators. So essentially, Formula D is dealing with 7, 8, 9 small businesses and working with them and kind of relying on them to act as the ambassadors and feeding drivers into the series. And we assist by promoting them and bring some expertise, rules and regs, things like that to the table. We knew that these are all small operations, so we've never made a dime off of Pro Am. We don't charge a fee in terms of a traditional kind of motorsports model. We could be looked at as like a sanctioning body, and hey, if you want your Northern California series to be sanctioned by us and you want us to put a stamp on it, you need to pay us a fee. You need to buy this from us. You need to buy insurance, et cetera, et cetera. We went with, I think, what we thought was an easier model and said, look, we're not going to charge you anything, but let's kind of try to work hand in hand. And obviously as the sport developed and things, kind of change and work through over the years, other issues, other obstacles came about, and we have to try to tackle them. I think we're in a very kind of concerning time within Pro-Am. I think Pro-Am is still a very vital part. We have to figure out a way to inspire young drivers to go and compete at a local level, not just for fun, not just to drive on the track for an hour or two, half the day and bring the car home. And it's not, there is something for weekend fun and your missile car and all that stuff, and that's fine, and that plays a part within the whole kind of sport of drifting. But there also needs to be competition, and so that Pro Am goes to Pro 2 and Pro 2 goes to Pro, and then we rely on that. Yeah. How much of a heavy hand are we going to carry on Pro Am organizers? That's a balance. They don't pay us anything, but at the same time they did say, hey, we're going to kind of fall in line with the stuff. And so you see a little bit of a variance. Some series are a lot stricter in their rules and regs. Some are looser because maybe they want a higher car count or they lower the reg fees. So everybody operates a little bit differently. Now we can be Big Brother, which everybody loves and hates all at the same time, and bring everybody in closer alignment and say, look, no, registration has to be maximum this much. You have to run these set of safety rules and regs. You have to. Maybe that's where we need to go, but I think that's kind of the crossroads where we're at now.
So do you think as part of like maybe working a little bit more with Pro-Am series, I remember there used to be more Pro-Am happening at the same time than FD was happening. Obviously now with FD with Pro 2, it tends to be more like, okay, if there's Pro 2 at the same time than regular Pro 1, they're gonna take a priority. But would you guys, for example, now that you're moving to Vegas, would you consider having Vegas, the Southwest Drift, Vegas Drift guys running an event at the same time that you guys are running FD, which gives more exposure also to the Pro-Am guys, to the professional drifting scene?
I think it's always a balance. I think with the Vegas scenario, I think, could it be that we run Southwest Drift Series there as well as Pro 2 and as well as Pro, and so we have a full weekend of drifting action, right? I think that's definitely possible. One of the challenges that we've had before is that the level of organizers and their ability to run on these weekends. We've done it before where on some tracks it's been really smooth and really good. And we've also have done it with organizers where it's actually caused, some contention and chaos with the facility. But yeah, I mean, I see that. I see that, Pro 2 definitely took some track time away from some of the Pro-Am partners that we used to have on the same weekends. But, at the root of it, is that the solution? Would that really help? I don't know.
Yeah, this is I really do love this topic because there's once again so many different scenarios you could do and things like this. And one thing, and this is just me talking on my behalf. It seems so it seems like you guys have mentioned that each Pro-Am series runs their own style of operation, right? So you have these 4 different Pro-Am series across the United States kind of feeding you guys their drivers. Now, once again, their level of driving is very different to each region that they're in. Some may have a more lean, laid back type of party event. The other guys are trying to breed Pro 2 drivers, right? Do you think not having any type of structure affects their longevity running in a Pro 2 because there is no physical structure for them to follow, which also creates confusion or potentially creates confusion because they have no structure. So when they're stepping into something like Formula Drift, they don't have the basic guidelines to follow. They're just getting their feet wet for the first time when they jump into Pro 2.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say, I mean, to me, this is a conversation I had very recently. To me, I think the idea of what Jim brought up, that they operate as individual business units, is in itself something to think about from the big picture standpoint. When you narrow down in on it a little bit more specifically, to me, there's no contradiction between a Pro-Am affiliate having a diverse number of things that they do in their business model, one of which is fielding Pro-Am drivers into Pro 2. They could have all the grassroots drifting they want. They could have all the specialty event series that they want. They could have anything that the market in their particular region is asking for, and still have a Pro-Am program that leads to Pro 2. Right. And part of understanding what that Pro-Am program that leads to Pro 2 is managing the expectations of those drivers. What is required for you to go into Pro 2? What should you expect when you get to the Pro 2 series? What type of vehicle preparation should you have? Should I, if I become the Pro-Am champion in year 1, maybe do a second year of Pro-Am to build my program a little bit better? All those are things that an individual that's running a Pro-Am or anybody that is an employee of that Pro-Am series needs to be able to think about when they're managing a Pro-Am series. That doesn't mean that they can't also have all these other things that Jim spoke about that play a role in their business model.
Right.
I mean, what we're seeing in the drifting community in general is that and just like in anything, whether it's stick and ball sports where, you're playing home run derby with your brother in the backyard, but you love going to baseball games, or you have a friend that plays college baseball or whatever it is, or the type of skateboarding or snowboarding that you like. There's a huge panoply of interest when it comes to a specific type of sport. And the same thing has been happening with drifting over the years. There are people that are just into the missile cars. There are people that love to go to, events where there's a musical, component attached to it, and it's more of a party environment. And there's people that really just want to be professional drifting athletes. Right. And if you want to do that, there's a clear path about how that happens. Mm-hmm. And the point where we accept responsibility is when you get to Pro 2. So what we can do for Pro-Am partners is help them where they think that they need help for their specific region, for their specific drivers, on how to better prepare those people to go into Pro 2. And from there, we'll take it from there, and we will try to help guide those guys along. That's why we have these programs like with Achilles and Next, and that help mitigate some of the top line issues that these guys deal with in terms of cost. But you can still have a very robust business model as a Pro-Am partner and do many different things in your program that are not related to just getting drivers to Pro 2.
I think too is that, like our conversation about drivers, Pro 2 or Pro wise, is that it's a two-way street. These organizers opt in, just like we opt into having a relationship with them. We are at their disposal, and we are here to communicate with them and to do our best to support them. We don't have all the answers, and we can't underwrite everything. That's a fact. And I think those that are out there that's talking about what's happening in Pro-Am have to kind of ask themselves, like, do we even want to go down the road where it's Formula D that's operating these Pro-Ams, or is it better to keep it as a regional identity, and regional organizers are still doing that? You have trying to find correlation, but if you have things like minor league baseball, they're all kind of affiliates or branches of certain major league teams, but the type of entertainment activities, promotions, things like that at minor league games, depending on if you're in one part of the country or another, is very different, and that's okay. That's a regional thing. That's a organizer thing. That's a team-based thing, and I think every organizer can be unique. But maybe I think the next evolution really is that there needs to be, we may have to step up our kind of enforcement of certain things like rules and regs, and making sure that everybody is truly in alignment. Mm-hmm. And then about things like, well, what inventory potentially can each Pro-Am series offer up? We've gotten this from the beginning of Pro-Ams, like, hey, we need your help to bring sponsors to the table, things like that. But you go to one series and you ask one series and you say, hey, can I get your entry list for the year? Are there 30 individual drivers that have come to your 4 rounds this year, or is it 60 individual drivers that have come, but your average car count is 24? Are you able to tell us this? No, not really. Okay, or yes, we can. Okay, but do you have information about these drivers? Do you know their age range? Do you know what kind of car they're driving? Oh, no, we don't. Okay, one organizer says that, but the other organizer says, yeah, I got all that. I got all the data that you need. Have it. Take it to whatever companies that want to participate with us. And so if we have 8 different answers to those questions, how do we go to AEM and say, hey, look, can you do a contingency program across the board for all Pro-Am groups? Right. Can you be a official ECU or official air intake for all the Pro-Am groups?
Right.
We're unable to do that because everyone is so different and operates differently, and so maybe the onus is on us to try and bring that together, but the fine balance is, how do we give them and allow them to still be kind of individual businesses, but still balance that with some of the rules, regs, constraints that maybe FD has to put on them.
I would love to operate a Pro-Am series with my Arizona guys, and if there's an opportunity for me to try to run one with my Arizona guys, I would love to talk to you guys to try to open a Pro-Am series dedicated to structuring and developing potential Pro 2 drivers, and I would love to talk to you guys eventually about that. But that's something I'm very, very interested in. I'd like to try to do something if there's any opportunity.
No.
Like,
Sorry, Corey.
No.
Try again.
Yes, there's always an open door over here, Corey.
I do, man.
Sure.
No, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because there hasn't been a model based, like you guys said, it came from the top and trickle down. There hasn't been a model strictly based on developing a driver to be ready for that series. Yeah, you can still go out and compete, and you don't have to move if you don't have to, but it's, once again, trying to get all the Pro-Am guys that are competing in your series. There's no reason why. I'm lucky because I put in a lot of time, I met a lot of people, and I created a lot of relationships, and I'd like to utilize that. And I don't know if the other Pro-Am organizers are fully utilizing their relationships. And obviously you guys are great examples of putting great partners together and using them, especially this new Pro 2 tire rule. That's purely based on growing, developing your relationships and utilizing for them. And we haven't seen anything really like that at a Pro-Am level. And I feel like I would want to try to develop something like that on a smaller scale to prepare people better for Pro 2 while getting on, maybe a specific tire setup or a few rules and regulations that you guys base off of. Because right now in Pro-Am, there's really not many rules. I can come out there with 2,000 horsepower on a 315, right? I could do that in Pro-Am, and I could probably win it, and I could probably move on.
No, you can't on a 315.
I can, Sam. And Pro-Am, absolutely.
Oh, Pro-Am,
I can
sorry,
do whatever
I
I
thought
want.
Pro
But
two.
that's my
Sorry, I
point,
thought Pro
Sam.
two.
That's my point, right? I can do that in Pro-Am. So when I
Yeah.
make that jump, everything is freaking changing. So I think it's at a point where it's like, why can't there be a series develop towards what people are planning on going to with a little bit
So,
more
Corey,
confined rules?
Would
Go.
you like to see Jim and Ryan take a heavier hand in organizing Pro-Am events?
Well, didn't you guys back in the day used to do driver searches?
Way back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always this is a new sport. There's always evolution. We used to do a once a year. Hey, you're from every region. It's like a Pro-Am invitational. You're the top drivers of every region. You come to Irwindale or we've done it at Laughlin and random places, and you drive. But what became of that was, well, wait a minute. If I have a bad weekend, I'm screwed for the year.
Right.
So we want more consistency. Okay, great. Let's evolve that into why don't run regional series, and if you're the top of a regional series, and that's where Pro-Am kind of came from, is like, well, you have each region has to operate 4 rounds so that you can get used to running multiple events, and some Pro-Am series go to a couple different locations, so you get used to kind of going around, and then that's where the gap from those 4 rounds to 7 rounds zigzagging across America was challenging. And then then Pro 2, then
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I hope I'm wrong about, but I get the feeling that it's kind of this conversation is kind of based in a little bit, is that it's too hard to become a pro driver. And a lot of the topic of conversation seems to be stemming from the Pro-Am level and trying to get into Pro 2. And if that is true, I hate to burst your bubble. Yes, it is hard to be a professional driver. It's hard to be a professional drifter.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I can tell, there is no other motorsport in the world that is accessible as our sport for getting somebody within a very short period of time with very limited personal finances that just needs to have the right amount of drive and passion to be a professional that can become a professional. And at any other level of almost any sport in the world, if you don't start at a very young age, if you don't have a very, very wealthy family, forget about it. But I know tons of drivers that are in the Pro Series right now that basically started with nothing, that would now consider a major portion of their life and their business that they run as a professional drifter, or based on their involvement in being involved in Formula D. And there's some guys I know that have made it in as little of 3 years. I mean, you have to look at situations like here. Denofa is a perfect example. Here's a guy that was getting tired of running his own program, saw how difficult it was, and took the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go knock down this other guy's door and say, I want to be involved in your program. I'm not walking out of here until you say yes. And that turned out to be one of the, in my opinion, one of the best moves that we've seen in a long period of time. And I feel confident in saying that will pay dividends for him.
Absolutely.
And for the RTR team in the future.
So, yeah, the whole program is benefiting from it.
And I think this whole conversation is kind of like a life lesson type conversation that I think some people need to kind of realize is that all this stuff that we do, none of this should be easy. It's all hard. If we stopped every single time when somebody said it's too hard to do it, we would never get anywhere. I mean, every single day for the first 10 years of this sport, people are always telling us this is a fad, this is a fad, this is a fad, this is a fad. But we didn't want to accept that.
Right.
And if you're a driver that's passionate about what you do and you're into it, you will find a way to make it happen.
Yep.
And you will learn what it takes to happen. You'll ask the right questions. You'll get involved. Corey, I heard your story last week about how you got involved with the K-Sport guys. That is a perfect example of somebody taking a hard road to get to where they want to be. So, just that for 2 cents.
No,
and then unfortunately, real quick, because I didn't get a chance to be on the show last week because I was unfortunately traveling for work. But yeah, I really wanted to breach on that topic, and I'm happy you brought it up. In that, I think it should be hard. I think it should be harder. I think that the F1ization, NASCArization of Formula Drift is a good thing. I think the top tier should be the biggest, baddest motherfuckers in the world. And it kind of is right now. But I think it should be harder. I think it should be continue to be difficult. I think it should continue to be the top tier. And if we water the top tier down whatsoever, I think we're going in the wrong direction. I don't believe there should be more restrictions on Pro 1. And that doesn't mean I don't think there should be leveling across the field to make it even for all the players. But it should be the premier, top, most important, fastest, craziest sport in the game. And there should be grassroots. There should be Pro 2. There should be Pro Am.
They all feed each other.
Everything has a place. Everything should feed each other. There should be an entire exhibition league of stock S13s that I brought up a ton because I want to see that because it's ridiculous. But there should be party cars. There should be missile cars. But there should be the F1. There should be the NASCAR. And I think Formula Drift needs to be that. And anyone that thinks it should be watered down, I believe, is mistaken.
Well, Formula Drift gives a platform for drivers to sell their program. You know, for me, for example, we talk about the K-Sport deal, and I'm just going to touch on that just real quick. It's like, if I wanted to try to keep selling a Pro-Am deal, it's very difficult to sell a Pro-Am deal. Yep. It very is. If it's based on an audience, or if it's based on a live stream, or if it's based on a CBS Sports, Pro-Am doesn't have that, right? But when I was able to get my license through Pro-Am, I don't remember who I emailed, if I emailed Cesar or one of you guys. I literally got the deck, and the first thing I started doing was selling the Formula Drift deck, saying, hey, do you know what, guys? I'm going to be part of this event. Even though I didn't have necessarily tons of value yet, I used the resources that Formula Drift supplied, which did have the value. And that's what allowed me to get the budget to get in that. Because if I just put a deck together for a Pro-Am series, not saying it's impossible to get money for Pro-Am, it's absolutely possible. It's just scaled based on return on what they're providing or what you're providing within that series. But Formula D gave me a bigger opportunity to pursue drifting as a professional. And it was the resources that they provided. Now, from there, you have the ability to create more outlets, and you have the ability to create more media, and you have the ability to create content and all these other things. But it was just that initial foot in the door to use the resources that Formula Drifts had at the tip of their fingertips. You know what I mean? Like, I could sell the point of like, oh, they have 3 million Instagram followers. You know, they really support, at the time, Pro 1. You know, we could potentially get some content out on here. We can get some content on there. We can get on the live stream. But it's supplying those numbers, and some companies see value in that rather than staying in Pro-Am. Because I could have stayed in Pro-Am, and it's funny to think of this because everybody's like, oh, you know what, Pro-Am is cheap. I don't think there's one driver in Pro-Am that's getting their events covered. They're paying out of pocket. So however long you run Pro-Am, you're going to be probably paying out of pocket for a majority of it. And it's still probably going to be anywhere from, I would say, I'm going to shoot low, let's say $1,800 up to about $5,000-6,000, just depending on what range you're in. You're still going to be paying that for a very long period of time. But you open up an opportunity when you go to Formula Drift to help get some funds covered if you can provide the proper information. I was lucky enough to do that.
Yep. Yeah. No. And I think you'll see the value of Pro 2 go up year over year. I think next year in particular will be a really big year for Pro 2. So if you have the heart and you have the ability and you can manage to make your way through Pro-Am and get to Pro 2, you've already given yourself a huge advantage because now you're only one step away from the Pro Series, and you're going to be able to walk in and take all the metrics of Pro 2 and sell against that program. So yeah, it's gonna take some personal effort from you to figure out what it needs in order for you to get to that level, but it's perfectly obtainable. And
absolutely.
It's we shouldn't say that it's easy. The process is easy to understand. It's you that has to put in the hard work.
Right. And as we see things grow, I think it's, and we've already seen it, Pro 2 now is the equivalent of Pro 1 a couple years ago. And I fully believe that Pro-Am is probably nearly at where Pro 2 was at its inception. And we're going to keep on seeing that progression. And I think that's how it should be, in that it's not going to be strange to see, I think, a greater involvement in the Pro-Am series and greater money being injected into it as hopefully the sport continues to grow and as drivers progress down the line. And I think that it's a natural progression. And I see why people are frustrated. I see why it seems like such a long shot now to get to Pro 1. But as you said, it's not easy. And people like Odie and Matt Field can tell you that, because neither of those dudes have the biggest programs by any means. But Matt Field is killing the media game. Odie placed third, and he has probably one of the smallest programs out of anyone, and he has shown that he has what it takes. So when you hear, for lack of a better term, this bitching about the dudes that have too much money in the sport, like, talk to Odie, see what he has to say about it. Like, I think that there's no contest as far as dedication and
I saw some comments earlier in the chat, and they were saying, oh, Formula Drift may turn into like an IMSA or a Le Mans, where it's the people who show up with a lot of money and they can compete. I tell people this all the time. My two favorite form of motorsports is sprint car racing and drifting. And let me tell you why. Because drifting is one of the form of motorsports where you can pay, but you're not guaranteed to do anything. Like if I were to pay for an IMSA ride, I could take, let me say, somebody off the street that has some driving ability. You can turn a lap around a racetrack. I could turn a road racing lap around Road Atlanta, right? Let's pick that track for example. Right, so I can pick Joe Schmo who has $1 million. I can put him in a Porsche GT3 Cup car. Say, hey, thanks for $1 million. Go turn your laps. Are they going to be fast? No, they will not be fast. But you know what? He will be able to turn a few laps, and that'll make his day. If that guy came to me and says, Corey, here's $1 million. I want to go drifting, and I put him at Road Atlanta, do you think that guy will be able to turn a drifting lap at Road Atlanta?
Is going straight into the kitty litter.
No, it takes a level of ability that a lot of people can't pay to be into.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense, and I don't want to sound like it does require a level of driving that you can't just pay. You have to have a level of talent. Not saying road racing is not talent. I road raced forever. I love road racing. It's just different because you do see that at IMSA because people can't pay to turn a lap. It won't be fast. You can't do that in drifting.
And in resume, money doesn't buy skills. It's that simple. Like a lot of people think having a lot of money, having a huge program guarantees you the win. No. You can give the exact same program that James Dean had to, I don't know, Paco Ibarra. Paco's not going to win.
Well, give it to JR Hildebrand, the guy who qualified pole for Indy 500. He even tried FD. And I repeat this a lot, and I don't know if you guys heard this, Ryan or Jim, but they said qualifying for an FD event is more stressful than qualifying for the Indy 500. It is one of those sports where you literally have 2 shots to make it into the show. It's very stressful, and it takes a level of driving that you can't just put around a track. And you can have all the money in the world.
I think people have really short memory. They forget about that. They forget about how real-time racing and 4-time World Challenge champion Pierre Kleinuting entered the series 7-8 years ago before it really took off with various international drivers and struggled. A lot of people forget about all these various drivers that have tried to come into the series that either have shown that they have talent in other forms of racing, have shown that they have funds and availability to build a car and run a team. But there is a fine balance, as you stated. You need skill, you need proper funding. I mean, you can't do it with nothing, but you need proper funding to build a reliable car. And again, you balance that with your skill in order to be successful in the series. And I mean, the sky is not falling. I mean, we go through struggles and ups and downs, like any business, any sport, any industry, anything. There's things that need to be fixed. There's critique and concerns are all healthy. Though I personally hate it sometimes, it's natural and it happens. But the sky is not falling. People have to not freak out.
That sound. I mean, Sam just came back and he went to the bathroom. But yeah, no, I totally agree. And one of the things, I think like a good example, and I'm not trying to shit on Nick Hogan, but Nick Hogan is a good example of somebody who came up with a lot of money, with a big program, with a flashy Viper, and he didn't really put a dent on the competition. It doesn't matter how much people says all the money in the world, whatever. Yeah, well, there's a driver that had all the money in the world, and it didn't do good.
What about Tyson Beckford? Anybody remember Tyson Beckford in the series?
I vaguely remember that, but I don't know. I don't remember how well he performed.
Ryan, learn us a little bit about that.
I don't want to say anything disparaging about him, but yeah, I mean they came in with a program. I think with Tony Braccio Hoppa. I think I don't remember exactly, but in Chicago, and yeah, I think in a practice lap or maybe in a qualifying lap, he wrecked the car into the
brand new
to the K-rail.
Celine Mustangs, new tire deal, a lot of attention, a lot of flair, but
this is to your point, Corey, is that. Money can buy you opportunity. It can't buy you the skill set. It's not going to buy you your passion for the sport. If you have a a very remote interest in it and you think it's a cool thing and you want to throw some money at it, all my experience has told me in the past that pretty much doesn't sustain itself. You have to really love the sport and be willing to go out and learn it. There's a kid in Japan right now that's like 16 years old. Oh man, his name has lost me right now. Pure raw talent. All right, doesn't really come from a somebody in the chat give me the name. I don't know why I'm lost right now. Doesn't come from a wealthy family, but was recognized by just going out there and drifting with his little S13 that he had that basically was built from nothing, and got recognized by a big sponsor there and got a ride to run in FD Japan. And to my eyes, this kid is going to be one of the futures of the sport in Japan, possibly in the US. And this is somebody that just was a passionate kid about drifting. Right. So you see these stories all day long, and I don't know anybody in the series right now that's independently wealthy, that is funding their own program by being independently wealthy. All the people in the sport that I know of right now have worked their ass off to get to where they are, and they've done all the right things to put themselves in a position to partner with a company that wants to support them, figure out what the best way is to market their particular brand, whether it's what was that?
That was probably Sam.
Sorry, I
back.
had chimichanga for lunch.
Whether it's teaming up with an OE or a tire manufacturer or a non-endemic brand, all those kind of things that are learned over time and that are learned as you get a little bit more articulate in the sport. That's the stuff that you help sustain yourself if you really are passionate about doing the sport, and there's ways to do it. And as far as the series is concerned, we're here to help drivers along in that path. If people have questions about what should I do and what should I say to sponsor X, or what do you think about this particular idea, that we do that all the time. Jim and myself have personally looked and helped edit people's individual proposals to see if there are things that they're saying that they shouldn't, or if they're using wrong metrics, or if there's ways that they can spice it up design-wise. I mean, that's the cool thing about it, is that we're literally a phone call away and we can help you in your program. So there shouldn't be a problem for somebody that's in a situation where they're going into a pro-am right now that is trying to make their way to be a pro, to figure out what that pathway is and how to get there. There just shouldn't be an issue.
I agree, 100%. That's an awesome statement.
So I got disconnected there, unfortunately.
Sam, they said how much your videos have been terrible lately, and that you didn't get your media credentials for next year. So
Stop.
Actually, it's probably true. I think it's been pretty confirmed at this point.
So Sam, what do you say?
I'm serious. I got big news. I'm not going to be doing Von's team next year.
Oh.
Yeah. Ryan Sage asked me to be his personal dietitian. I'm going to be doing Ryan Sage's diet for most of the rounds.
Oh, you're Ryan's dietitian now?
Yeah,
right,
just going to be making sure.
What's sure. Hey, so real quick, Sam, what's going to be his diet for the first week?
Chimichangas for the most part. The all chimichanga diet is really hot in Hollywood these days.
Yeah.
It's working on Corey, that's for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember the name of the driver because people are asking in the chat. Yana Guida.
Wida.
Yeah.
We'll check him out.
Is he the guy who drifts with flip-flops?
Probably.
I'm not sure. It's a green S13, sponsored by. I think he's on Yokohama, maybe. But yeah, cool, dope kid.
I say it's question time, and that's it.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we're gonna head over. I know we've been hogging all your guys' time, so we thank you guys so much. But let's go to Instagram questions, and we'll send you guys on your way.
Feel free to grab your phones if you want to check on the questions.
Let's see
we
here.
Have a lot. And
there you go, Nate. Yep, Top Tool S13. Sorry.
Let's start with our
Tool.
One of our first-time listeners, first-time callers. Aaron Dukester says, "Do you guys have a secret handshake?"
Oh.
No secret handshake.
No. Do you have?
You should.
Do you have a secret booty shake? What do you do? That's why. Let's refine that question. What's something that maybe only you two know about each other? What's something that's like special between you two weirdos?
I think, generally speaking, the environmental office of Formula D, I think people would be very surprised about. If you had a camera in here at all times, I'm sure you'd get some good laughs out of it. But we
can
are.
Arrange that.
Yeah, we really are kind of like a screwball family. So there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on over here.
Oh yeah. It would be. It would make its own.
But then you guys will get. You guys will hear all the inside jokes.
I know.
Let's make this a
Okay.
reality show.
Hold on. What do you guys think of our show in the office? What goes on about our show there?
Oh boy, here we go. We're setting ourselves up.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's I love what you guys are doing. I think this is great. You know, one of my criticisms about like the space in general for the past couple of years is that there hasn't been enough people actually doing drifting specific content in this format. So it's podcasts or hosting and all that kind of stuff, and we've had to rely upon a very small number of people to kind of get the message out. But I think what you guys are doing is helping expand that, so I love it.
You're right. We do deserve budget from you. All right, Ryan. I agree. Next question. We'll talk. We'll send over an invoice later.
You didn't see the comment? We're just handing out money.
Yeah.
You don't know that? You just need a call, and we just hand out money.
Look, I've been to your house, Jim. It is extravagant. He has a fountain of Ryan Sage in the courtyard, and it's a fountain of him and Ryan on each other's shoulders. Don't ask me how it works. It's very complicated. It looks like a pretzel. But
In Boston,
It looks like a game of
in Boston
Twister.
Gold.
yeah.
I have a question.
You guys got some questions?
Yeah, I have a question from Drift Illustrated. What's the story behind the name Formula D? What was your first choice?
That's a
Or
good one.
was
You
that your
can
first
do that
choice?
one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously is like reference to Formula One, but I think we wanted something simple that could also be used as like a like a 2-letter moniker, like a F1 kind of thing, something that's easy, that isn't like long-winded, that has like 32 characters or 5-letter initials, something to that effect. So we thought FD would be simple, and we came up with a couple. I don't remember what the other ones were, but we settled on this one.
Did you guys have any of the names in the hat that you were kind of deciding on outside of Formula Drift?
Yeah, I think we did. I don't remember. Like Jim
God,
said,
I want to know these.
I don't remember exactly what they were, but it was a play on other things, I think, in motorsports. But yeah, Jim and I have always been really big fans of Formula One. And we thought that there was some kind of marriage there that hopefully wasn't going to be cheesy, but that we could build off of, build a moniker on, a cool logo. And because we really did want to position ourselves as, the elite group doing drifting. And I think at that time, both of us were still pretty super young. So we were, out there aggressively trying to, push this as like the greatest motorsport in the world.
Yeah, I would have named it Slip and Slider Cars like it's ice skating.
Yeah, like, in parentheses.
Figure skating, like figure skating.
I would have.
Yeah, was there a close number 2 choice, or was it always just kind of Formula D? That's how it's going to be.
Man, if there was, I don't remember. I remember we were doing like hey, how do you incorporate, Drift Championship USA or something to that effect, But yeah, I mean, obviously it wasn't close enough because I don't remember, or I'm just getting old.
I would have called it figure skid marks racing.
Figure skid marks. Sam, what would you call it?
I would have called it, hey, we're just a couple of guys starting a new sport that's with cars going sideways.
Perfect.
With V8 sometimes, but also 4 cylinders and 6 cylinders, turbocharged, but has to be rear-wheel drive. Anyways, here's the sport.
CBSSports.com.
I have a question from JW Ride 12C. Where do you see Formula Drift 15 years from now on?
Whoa.
15, not 10. 15.
Where's Formula Drift 15 years from now?
I mean, I would say we'd had a clear answer, but I think as we've seen in the first 14 years, the sport is ever shifting and evolving. We haven't. I don't think we've fully matured as a sport like NASCAR or endurance racing or Formula One, where it kind of stabilized and said, hey, this is the general direction of how it is, and it just becomes an evolution of which tracks we're going to and what rules we're going to implement. So I don't know. I think the main thing that we always want to try to get to is foundationally the sport has to be more widely recognized and shown that it's a viable investment, because as everybody has been talking about is about cost, this is expensive, that's expensive, cost containment, this and that, but ultimately. Not that those issues will be resolved or mitigated with that, but I think with wider recognition would bring more investment dollars from different brands if they see the value, if they really understand the value that we're offering, that the drivers are offering. I think that's the main, for me, I think that's the main point, is that it's the financial health and feasibility of the sport. And with that, I think then we can grow and invest and reinvest into different things about making it more exciting or bringing it to more places, or, whatever evolution the sport has.
I'm going to need you to make some hard predictions that we can laugh at in 15 years.
We will be
electric
a
flying cars.
all electric car racing, and tire smoke will not be allowed and will be deemed a zero.
Hover cars.
Yeah, all hover cars.
It'll be all
electric.
on a wet slick track, and that's what drifting will become.
Hell yeah.
Pretty much the movie Speed Racer, but tires.
Here's a question. I got this one. This was actually a good one. This is from Cody86. If you guys were to compete in Formula Drift yourselves, what chassis would you choose and why?
Ooh, that's good.
Oh, I mean, yeah. When we were talking about the James Dean thing earlier, I think the most well-balanced chassis seem to be the ones that you can need to do the least amount of research and development and fabrication on to be good. So for me, it would be S15 first, and then probably GT86.
Oh, there you go. What about you, Jim?
Um,
A Buick Riata or a
Yes.
Kia
Sorry,
Stinger?
Camry. I think
Yeah,
Camry.
Previa.
Thanks, Brian.
maybe we bring back the El Camino.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just for the hell of it, right?
Yeah.
That was
Hey,
that's a
Well,
good
they
segue.
have. I saw at SEMA, and I always forget about it until I go to SEMA. Is they have a really cool what's that? It's a Camaro to Trans Am kit, right? Haven't seen that? Where it's
yep.
like a
Your name would be Hillbilly Jim.
current chassis Camaro, but you can get the 70s, 80s Trans Am.
Yeah,
Right?
Smoking the Bandit kit.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's a good segue to a question from Rusty 40. He says, "What's your favorite drift car in the history of Formula Drift?" I know this might take a second to recollect, but what's your favorite car in the history of your series?
Honda Element.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
the
Oh
Porsche.
man, I don't know. So many. I mean,
You
yeah.
like the Porsche?
I think that was definitely probably the most radical at the time. So that's got to be up there for sure. Oh man,
It doesn't
favorite.
have to be radical. It can be normal and play Jane. Just what was it? Was it
I like
Sammy Gubinet's car? Was it?
I liked
one of the-
Forsberg's S15 in year 2. I think year 2 or year 3 had that. I like that one a lot. That was cool.
I actually really like the GTO,
Damn.
and even with the Red Bull livery was cool, and then actually the Dye Bridgestone livery I thought was really cool when Dye drove that car.
Corey, what are your favorite cars?
My favorite cars in FD history, I would probably have to pick. Let me think right now. Let me think of something.
While you think,
I
Sam.
got one.
I like when Roddy Piper showed up with his S10 Extreme.
Hold on, Big Balls has a favorite car. What do you got?
Ryan Hampton brought in like a late
Camaro?
70s, late
Oh,
late
that- yeah,
60s Camaro.
Yeah,
That
the
was
Falcon.
I wish I could see more muscle cars going to that level into drifting. I know it's going to be pretty crazy, but that car really was just blew me away.
Big Balls wants to see more muscle cars and more
I mean,
muscular
that's-
drivers.
I would say my 2 favorite cars would be the Challenger
Okay,
and Forest S15.
there you go. Good picks.
I'm a little bit biased, but I just love that thing.
Yeah,
I really like the Doritos / Taco Bell livery that was on that the Honda Element. That was good, right?
Yeah. Corey, still
No.
waiting on you.
No, I'm
That's it?
I'm still thinking,
Is
dude.
that-
I'm gonna need time. Yeah,
just say
you're
the-
gonna-
just say the boss.
I feel bad for asking Ryan and Jim that question because I'm having a hard time picking.
Just
this
say
one
the
right
boss
now.
14.
No, it hasn't even ran yet. So
Uh,
it's out of the question.
It run
Oh yeah, so
qualifying.
that's a good question. This one's from Acrobatic Tony 42069XX. What do you guys think about Corey Hosford's
Oh my
future?
god.
What's Corey going to be doing in what's Corey's driving going to
love
be
how-
like next?
I don't know. It's in Corey's hands.
Thanks, Jim.
Corey's.
Well, actually, like a follow-up question. What would you like to see Corey do as far as driving in the sport?
I think Corey has given himself a great story to write about. So much failure and so much misery and so much struggle. But now the Rocky song turns on.
Yeah.
You hear it coming in the background. The motivation's coming. He's getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. He's heading out to Road Atlanta. He's getting on that track. He's throwing it sideways at 95 miles per hour. And he's standing on the podium, and all the misery will be worth it.
Dude,
What's going on?
Yes.
The Eye of the Tiger.
Yes. Except the
Hell yeah.
Rocky seems to be playing. I'm gonna look like Yokozuna running up to my car.
He's just doing slap chops against your car.
No, so I had.
There you go.
Oh boy, I wish the C had an ejection button in it.
That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of these questions are things that we thankfully touched on in the show, so that's pretty sweet.
I had a weird thought when I was in Irwindale. Actually, have you guys ever had a streaker before?
Uh-oh.
Oh, that's a good question.
No, we haven't had a streaker. I mean, there's been some naked body parts at the events, no doubt about that.
Oh,
For sure.
So, hey, so
We've
real,
been flashed on the judges' stand a couple times. Yeah.
so real talk. I was
And it
standing.
definitely wasn't as exciting as you guys think it is.
Well,
Yeah,
I was
mostly men.
okay. Sam, hold on. Let me finish my story. I was standing in the photo box right at the start-finish line, right where they do top 16 intro. I'm like, how awesome it'd be just to take off my shirt and pants and run across top 16 intro right now. But I know Andy Luck would get so pissed, but I want to do it because
That's
I
like
wanted to be
Corey's
the first. I wanted to be the first streaker in Formula D, and I wanted to.
But you
set
still
the mark.
can be, Corey.
I have Long Beach.
You could be the first and the last.
I know. Sorry, I was just thinking about that. I was like, man, they haven't been any streakers here before. Maybe I could be the first. But yeah.
Just,
then
I
I
mean-
thought about my life.
At least give us a courtesy and pull up Red Hot Chili Peppers and pull a sock in there.
Yeah, I'd go in full speedo, so
Okay,
and
well,
roller skates.
Doing the speedo. There you go.
You can do the Dunton man where you just put your underwear over your head like a mask and tie your shirt like a cape and then
Yeah,
use your socks.
So
for your
there's plenty
cotton
of
balls.
options.
You know?
But
And I'd say integrate that into my big dream of doing the rollerblades down the hill at Atlanta. And then I think combine those two, and you're going to have the
that
ultimate.
still needs to
get up.
happen.
Have you purified your relationship with Andy Luck enough to be able to afford streaking? You think?
well, that's the thing. Because I knew, like, oh man, if I did this right now, I'm sure I probably never be welcome back. So I was like, I had a second there. I'm like, God, this would break the internet right now if I did this. And then part of me's like, I would never drift again, probably in Formula Drift.
I think it's worth the penalty fee.
Well, that's what I was thinking. It's like, do I want to do this next year? I'm like, yeah, I do. I should probably not do this.
Corey, you're already screwed because someone is going to streak now in your name, and Andy Luck is going to take it out on you. You're going to get the full Luck treatment.
Well, my last year, when I decide I'm retiring like Robbie Nishida, that's the year I'm going to streak. I don't know which event it's going to be, but I'm going to do it.
Well, you have to
Sorry,
drive.
sorry
before you
guys,
retire,
for the
Corey.
forewarning. But
I have a
no, one last one, Paco. and then
Yeah,
we'll
I
get
have a
rolling.
question right here from Hot Dogs for Legs 69 420 XX Hot Dog Slammer. It's a nice name. What do you guys have behind you? And that's talking about Ryan Station.
Oh yeah, that's their
Yeah, that's-
environments.
What do I have behind me?
Ryan,
Yeah,
tell us what's behind
So
you.
you're at the office right now, Ryan, the Formula Drift office. It's still
Yeah.
daytime there, judging by that window behind you. So you're in Singapore, I think.
No, that's just a light.
I know.
Kind of looks like your own apartment, Sam.
I have here. I'll grab a couple things.
Yep.
So look at this. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Do you know what time
Sam.
it is?
I forgot I even had that there.
I didn't know
This is
you're
kind
in
of cool
a
though.
timer though. That's exciting. I didn't know that.
I showed you guys this earlier, but the live stream probably hasn't seen it. This was a driving shoe that Speedwell designed. I think was Jared still there when we did this, Jim, or was he just leaving there?
Just leaving. John P was there. They had that shoe. They had Ken Gucci. They had Sam Hubinet and Di, maybe?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Jared DeAnda, past life, worked for a company called Speedwell.
So that was the official Formula Drift racing shoe.
The one and only, and I think I only have the left foot.
Yeah, he doesn't know where the right foot is.
So did it ever went to production, or was just like?
Yeah, I think you could buy it. Yeah.
They're now worth
I have a pair.
$1,000 on eBay.
Let's see if we can find a set on eBay.
Uh,
I need one in my life.
What other you got a fin, you got a speedwell. What's something else cool on your wall, Ryan Sage?
Let's see. I've got. I think that's Singapore
Singapore?
GP track. Yeah, I have this.
What's that do?
I think this is from when we went to Qatar. They gave this to us. And
Nice.
like, hey, thanks for coming out.
That's cool.
That
That's
is
kinda cool.
correct, by the way. That
So
is
wait,
Singapore.
you got a participation trophy?
Yeah, participation trophy. I have a scarf,
You millennial.
Hey, welcome to Qatar.
and I have all my,
Vuvuzela.
I have all my hard cards.
Oh, nice.
God.
Make it rain on hard cards.
Those were expensive to buy.
And,
tell me,
and
Corey.
Jim, why don't you give us the equal treatment of what's behind you there?
Yeah. Ryan's making it look bad. He's still at the office. I'm at home trying to make sure my eyeballs aren't falling out watching TV.
We saw one of your little girls come into the background. It's
Yeah,
really funny.
she's like, are you talking to those guys again? Are you guys?
Oh no!
Oh, I feel so bad
I
now.
thought I would give you guys a familiar setting from last time, so it's still
Uh-huh.
to my alcohol.
The whiskey collection.
Look
You
at
got some
that.
fancy
Holy
Japanese
grail.
whiskey.
Shoot.
Oh my god.
Oh, is that absinthe on the right?
Hey, that's
Yeah,
that.
that's the one you gave me.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's that one bottle Sam butt chugged.
I hope you're not drinking from the bottle.
You? This one's almost done.
I think we helped with that.
Yeah.
But yo, what's your favorite Japanese whiskey?
What that I have here?
In general, but if you have it here, more the better.
Dang it! Hold on.
All right, he's
There you
currently
go. Oh, boy,
digging
what
out.
do we
There it
got?
is. All right, what's he got there?
That's a good one. All right. Coffee.
Nika.
It's like coffee. but
Naki coffee.
Ooh.
It's,
Oh,
it's,
that's
Jap-
nice.
it's Japanese spelling for coffee.
That looks pretty
Okay.
good.
So Jim is a big connoisseur of the Japanese whiskey, and it is the best of the qualities of whiskey in our opinion. We had some with him when we did our last show with him after the
$3.
middle tire day.
I'm
But,
I'm drinking
I think-
$3 wine. So
What do we get there?
My Taiwanese folk actually make a
Oh,
pretty
look
good
at that.
whiskey.
Oh, look at that.
Ooh.
Kavalan. So, fancy gentlemen, if you weren't aware, Jimmy the Law is very distinguished and has a very distinguished whiskey Scotch rack that we're going to likely demolish sometime in the next year when we hopefully get invited back to his house.
I say let's burn that house down.
Drink it
Whoa.
all. Paco, come on, dude.
Paco,
Anyways, guys,
Easy.
we want to thank you guys for being a part of
Thank you
this.
so much.
Thank you guys for doing what you do. Because if
Dad.
there was no Formula D, there would
Dad.
probably be no Maximum Driftcast.
That's very correct.
There would be no Sam Nelvin in drifting. There'd be none of us.
There will be no drift idiot.
There'd be no drift
There'd be-
idiot.
yeah.
But
So
thank you guys for everything.
Thank you for fighting the good fight, and we shall continue to try to fight the same fight. And we cannot wait for the developments in the off season, and we hope to hear all of the exciting news to come.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's been a real pleasure as always.
And before we let you guys go, if you guys want to add anything real quick, please feel free to just
Go ahead.
Say what you want.
Yeah.
Now and forever.
before we let you go.
I don't think anything in particular. I just, stay tuned. We've got some cool stuff coming up. We're going to try to make it not a lowly off season, but the silly season, it pretty much starts now. So there's going to be a lot of fun rumors, I'm sure, and we'll have a good time with it. But we're ready to kick off 2018.
Oh yeah, guys. Well, we cannot wait, and we will see you in Long Beach.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks,
homie.
boys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Funny thing is, are they gone? Okay.
All right,
now-
no, hold on. Now they're gone. All right, so obviously drifting is over. The sport's fucked. Formula Drift.
Dude, do you know what? Do you know what? It's
bunch
like
of sellouts,
no,
bunch
no.
of sellouts. Honestly, I cannot wait till it all crumbles
Sam,
and we can just
talking to them the whole time. I've been holding in a big fart. It's like hanging out with somebody for the first time. You don't want to let it go. Man, that's what I've been doing this whole time.
Once you let that thing, once you
Oh,
let that
man.
let it go.
Don't let it rip until the door is open, Corey,
Yeah.
please.
Oh, thank
We are
God.
in a
Whoa, I
sec-
can just
oh
let
my
that
God.
thing out now. Man, it's like hanging out for the first time. Thunder from down under. Ah.
Oh
Well,
my
that was
God.
pretty interesting, boys. Paco's.
That's Big Balls Brian.
Yeah,
Hey, I don't know what you're talking about.
Very good. At
Brian's
making
got a sound. Did you finally get Brian a soundboard?
No, that's his mouth. That's purely from his mouth.
That
He's
was
a
me.
human
That was me.
soundboard, pretty much.
He's a human centipede. Brian is the human centipede.
Well, I just want to give a shout out to Steve Vaxey because he just joined like right now. Like, good timing, bro. Like,
Steve Vacuum.
Steve Vacuum just joined the show,
good,
so
yeah,
thank.
good timing.
All right. So, anyways,
Leaving.
Yeah, we have a bunch of actually we've been doing some cool stuff lately, and there's a bunch of little things, but we wanted to focus today. It was totally on Dad and Dad, and I think that's a show title, right, guys? Should we
yeah,
call it
Dad versus
and
Dad, or Dad on
versus
Dad, Dad on Dad,
Dad on Dad, yeah, Dad on Dad. Okay. But yeah, we next week we'll get back to a regular show again of all the bullshit that you like to hear. We try to keep the bullshit to a minimum so we can get all the hard drift facts across.
So one thing interesting happened to me. I just want to say real quick. So based off the show, we talk about sponsors, we talk about people, and we talk about involvement. No, Sam, shut up!
kidding,
God
I'm
dang
kidding.
it! No, I had. You know what's funny is I've been talking with the guys at Portland Speed Industries (PSI), and they've been such a cool group of dudes to be talking to. Like
They know
that whole
today's-
organization. They're like, once again, they've been in drifting for a very long time, and you know they just been very supportive of the industry and the scene and the drivers. And I've been talking with them a lot, and they've been kind of helping me with my 2JZ platform as well. But once again, it was a lot of this is based on communication with one another, and don't be afraid to reach out to people. And keep doing what you're doing because you'd be surprised what people will be reaching out to you. So
PSI,
One of
your new life
the
coach?
PSI guys talked shit about me on the internet though. I don't remember which one it was.
that's good. But that's Sam. That's easy to
Bro.
do, and you do it to me all the time.
Yeah, but I do it to you because I hate you.
Oh, well, come on, Sam. But yeah, no. So that's super cool. So I'll give an update on my 2J. So fully built Wiseco boost line pistons, boost line rods, getting full cam kit on to get the full. I'm getting the valves done. I'm getting everything rebuilt. It's going to be a fully built engine, and I have two of them, so there's no excuses for one not running. But yeah, it's coming together, and I'm looking at the end of December to be driving the car for the first time with the new 2JZ setup. So I'm
What are you
super
gonna-
excited finally.
I'm calling it
What are you
right
gonna
now.
do when you? What are you gonna do when you blow out your O-rings?
Well, if I blow out my O-rings, I'll probably just stitch it up and try it again.
Okay.
I'm calling it right now. Magnum PSI.
Magnum PSI. That's a nice
Boom.
pocket.
Boom.
Yeah, so the car's still at American Motorsports. Those guys, once again, we're building it there. PSI has been supplying a lot of the help and knowledge and resources and just a bunch of cool people teaming up, working together, becoming friends, and doing what we want to do together. It's all fun and cool shit no matter what level
Nice.
you're on.
Nice. What about your hat?
But Corey, I didn't think you're ever gonna drive again.
What? No, they do. That's why that's why I'm getting help because once again, the thing is I couldn't do it alone, and people are willing to help support the cause. So even if you think you can do it or can't do it alone, there's people out there willing to help. Just keep
No,
doing
you're
what you guys are
supposed to
doing.
do it alone.
Suck a dick, Sam.
Look, drifting's not cool unless you have no help and it's all grassroots and you don't have money. That's the only way drifting's cool, Corey.
I forgot about that. I didn't spend much time on the forums lately.
Yeah, that's how it worked out for Sam. That's how it
Yeah, it worked out for Sam. Yeah. Yep.
Which part of that? The no money or the not drifting?
Well,
Both.
All of it?
doing it alone.
Ew.
But also, while we are on the thanking part of the show, we also want to thank AEM Intakes.
Yep.
We couldn't be doing this show if it wasn't because AEM Intakes.
their intakes are so succulent.
As you can see, our
Yep.
little lucky cat right there is so happy wearing his AEM hat right there. Look, he's saying hi.
Then you
Even,
like to
got
thank
even Corey's wearing it as well.
the $5 box from Taco Bell. Taco Bell is now one of our main sponsors. They've been giving us Dorito boxes.
Taco Bell's provided Sam with countless amounts of diarrhea. We want to thank them for all their support.
We want to actually thank all of our Patreon bros for sticking with us and helping support the show. Every little bit counts. Corey's gonna need another hemorrhoid surgery this week, but you know it's tough to keep on paying for that.
Yeah.
So we appreciate all the support for Corey.
Yep.
And also McLeod clutches, and clutch. What was it like? Drive
Clutch work. No, I want you to say whatever you want, Sam.
McLeod
Paco.
clutch work.
We want to thank Clutchworks and Sam and for
For
some reason we
supporting
got to
the
figure
show.
out how to streamline this outro because it's like it's new to us every single time we do it.
No. I mean, I think that's part of
that's
the
part-
fun.
that's
Is
part
that
of
it
the fun,
gets
yeah,
funkier
exactly.
and funkier every time. I'd like to thank Green Beans, just Green
Green bean
Beans in general, the
casserole,
specific brand. I just want to.
I'd like to thank Grandma Mimi.
I want to thank Quello because it's only $3.99
Is-
for a
hold on.
full bottle of wine.
Quail-
Show a little class,
Hold on.
Paco. Spend $5.
No, dude. I mean, it's $5 after taxes. If you. Oh shit. Corey's modifying.
I renamed it. Instead of, I called it Quaalude.
Ooh,
Hey,
nice.
hey, too soon.
It's Quaalude. So.
Too soon
Oh, and I think-
for Cosby reference jokes, Corey.
I think we're gonna have Lorette on sometime soon, and we're gonna do a wine cast because she's a wino. I'm a wino. Paco's now a wino, and I think we should get Corey to drink a bunch of wine and see what that happens. See what
Corey's a
happens then.
whiner, so that's almost the same.
I've maybe had a sip of wine my entire life. I do not.
I want to
drink
see
wine.
Corey drink
Chug.
an entire hobo
Just
jug.
give it a-
I'm
give it a
not
chug.
gonna drink that
Give it a
shit.
chug on live
No,
stream,
when I
Corey.
drink, then I
Go
get the
for it.
Asian glow.
Hey,
I
go
turn
for
bright
it.
red.
Everybody's
I can't
watching.
drink wine.
Peer pressure.
Nope.
Look, just give it a little. Look. Here comes the bottle.
Oh,
There it goes.
that smells like I watched
I mean, to be
Paco.
fair,
I walked
to
in.
be fair, Paco, I wouldn't drink that either.
No, I when I walked into Paco's house, I saw him do a headstand with that thing sticking out his keister, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not drinking out of that."
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the best way to do it is cartwheels. Because if you do cartwheels down
Oh,
a
It's
staircase,
those things.
You get shots.
Yeah,
You-
shot.
cartwheel,
shot.
cartwheel.
Yep. No.
honestly,
surprised
we've come up with
under
the ultimate butt chug method,
Butt
and that's the
chugging
way to
knowledge,
go.
Sam.
Think
But,
about, hey Sam, thinking about butt chugging, doing somersaults down the hill at Road Atlanta.
Somersaults?
Yeah.
While you're streaking.
Yep.
I think probably the best way though is to do four roller skates, one on each hand, one on each foot, going down the hill, butt chugging.
We should have a segment called
For-
Best Ways to Butt Chug.
What about
I'm gonna do my somersault down Road Atlanta.
butt chug pogo stick?
Is that
I
what you
feel
would
like
do?
I feel like the somersault's dangerous though,
Bungee
because
butt
it might get shot too far up.
Oh my god! I
I
think
hate-
we need to call this a day before we start
Yeah.
getting worse.
We're stepping to the dark side.
Ken Gushi's losing it in the chat. Hopefully,
I think Gushi- I
yeah,
love
if
Ken
you're listening to
Gushi.
this
Ken
episode after
Gushi,
the
I
fact,
love
don't
you.
forget to
Gushi-
try to
Do you know what? Fun
participate.
fact: Ken Gushi turned into a hillbilly redneck this week because he raced his first dirt car.
I can't wait. I hope
Ken
there's footage
Juicy
for
raced
that.
a dirt car this weekend. But I need to figure out his redneck name.
Is there Oh,
I don't know if there's footage, but Casey sent. Oh wait, Casey sent me a picture. Hold
Oh
on.
my god!
Hold on.
Oh,
Hold
all
on.
right, all right.
Hold
Is
on.
there
All
any-
right, so
is there any
we'll
videos on
take this
Instagram or
moment
anything?
to say
It's
that if you're listening to this on
private
our
Snapchat.
normal podcast means that is awesome and thank you. But we also do record this, of course, live on Facebook, usually Monday night, usually around 6 p.m. Mountain Time.
All right, look at that.
So
Oh,
do stick in for that moment. Corey's now showing a picture.
that right there, that's Corey Hosford's
So my brother-
Casey Hosford.
I call my brother Skateboard Jesus because he has really long hair and he looks like a younger version of Jesus. And so my brother sends me this picture saying, "Oh, I'm partying with Ken Gushi here in the pits before he races. I told him to run the bottom and keep it straight." That's a dirt track racing term. So, anyways,
I can't wait to see some footage from the Juicy.
All right.
and before we guys leave, go ahead and in the chat, guys, for you guys still with us on Facebook, please leave what you think Ken Gushi's redneck name should be. So when we close out, go through that. But thank you guys again for tuning in. Please feel free to drop Ken Gushi's redneck name in chat. Thanks again from the Maximum Driftcast crew, Patrons, AM, McLeod, all of us. We will be seeing you guys next week.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Sam. Thanks,
Bye.
Corey.
Bye,
Good night,
guys.
everybody.
Bye, or else.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.